Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenaton, and welcome to today's video for Legends of Runeterra. Today is the video where I go through and rate every single card in the latest expansion. The latest expansion is the Shurima expansion, Empires of the Ascended, I believe the name is. If you are new to this series, quick overview. I am going to go through every single card that has been recently released. I am going to give the card a rating based on constructed playability, so I am ignoring how good it is in a more limited format like Expedition or in other more niche formats like Singleton. Uh, the ratings will be from 0 to 5 stars. 0 stars means it's pretty much trash, meme level. 5 stars means, wow, this is a really good card, kind of like a meta or a deck defining kind of card. Think like a Twisted Fate in the current meta. As for the in between stuff, 1 star is like a unplayable card with a little potential. 2 is a niche card or it's an actual good card, but it only fits one deck. 3 is just a middle of the pack kind of card. Very okay. It fills up a role, but it's not too impressive, or maybe even tech cards. And 4 stars are basically 5-star cards that fall short in some form or another. Most cards are going to probably fall into the 2 and 3-star camp because that's how card games are. I believe that's all I have to say though before we start. Oh no, I got a little bit more I can ramble about. I just want to have you all know. These are just my personal opinions. Just because I say something doesn't mean it is 100% correct. In fact, I have in previous history thought a card is insanely good and it turns out to be unplayable, and vice versa. I've thought a card is unplayable garbage and it turns out to be a meta defining card. One more thing before we get into the ratings. Obviously, I don't even know why I'm mentioning this, but obviously, we're talking about the cards in their current iteration. We can't talk about things that will happen in the future, like buffs and nerfs and balance changes as well. So these ratings are purely on the card in its current form. Anyway, though, that's enough rambling. Let's go and look at the cards. We will go in alphabetical order through the regions and the cards. However, we will save Shurima for last because new region, so, might as well save the best for last, right? Oh well. So with that said, we will start with Bilgewater. And Bilgewater kind of didn't get that much good stuff. Bilgewater is one of the few regions that only gets 2 cards because they didn't get a champion. The other regions that don't get a champion and only get 2 cards are, if I can remember off the top of my head, Bilgewater, obviously. Targon, Ionia, and I think Piltover and Zon are the regions that didn't get a champion, so they only got 2 cards. Now then, as for the card on this screen, we have Loaded Dice. 4 mana slow spell for the rest of the round when you damage the enemy nexus. Nab 1. Sure. I don't think this card is good. I think this card is it's obviously combo oriented, but it's just too slow even for a combo. I look at this as more of a kind of a meme. Sure, there are some really cute combos, but those cute combos are just, well, like I said, bad. Like, I guess you could argue, like, well, streamer, you could technically play like Loaded Dice and then a bunch of warning shots, or maybe some like misfortune plus rally effects. Yeah, but why not just play good cards? I will say this though, if you're looking for a fun meme, unless this is not intended and they've patched it by the time I put out this video, Out of the Way does make this a permanent thing. So you could use Out of the Way and then play Loaded Dice to make it for the rest of the game. This effect goes off, but again, that's a 9 mana 2-card combo for not really affecting the field. So with that all said and done, I'm actually going to give this card 1 star because there is potential, I think, for some zany combos, and these kind of cards could be broken. It's a very unique effect that could break the card game. Who knows? Maybe in the future it'll get some more support, but for now, I don't think you should play it in the game. Next up, another mediocre card. Lost Riches. 4 mana burst speed spell, draw a treasure. If there aren't any to draw, create 2 treasures in your deck instead. There's only 3 treasures in the game right now. I have shown them on screen over here to the left. It's slow. It's a really, really slow card. Treasures are powerful. Like, I don't believe that's a controversial thing to say. Like, every single treasure is powerful. Sure, I guess Keelbreaker is less good against control decks, but it's still decent. The problem is, at least in the current meta, you don't want to be this slow, especially as a deep deck, which is what you're probably going to run Lost Riches in. I feel like if you just want extra late game and you're a Bilgewater deck, but somehow not sea monsters, there's probably better ways to add more late game, either in Bilgewater or your other region. But I guess that's like the one scenario I can see it. And sure, if you play this in sea monsters and then you toss cards, you can sort of draw the treasures because of the whole, like, if you toss a treasure, it gets drawn instead, but then you're slowing how fast you get to deep, which is kind of not what deep wants to do. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the card. Only 1 star for me. So poor Bilgewater, only 2 cards, and they both are kind of mediocre. Next region though, Demacia, a region with a champion. First card up though, kind of bad. Like, honestly, probably one of the worst cards in the whole set. It's Battlefield Prowess. 1 mana slow spell, grant an ally +1/+1. The only upside of this is it's a permanent buff, so cool, yay. Don't get me wrong, the effect is fine. Like, getting +1/+1 to something permanently is a good effect. I don't want to waste a whole card in my deck for this kind of effect. The only way I see this card ever getting played and constructed is if there's some kind of mechanic in the future that cares about you casting spells on your own units. You know, like self-buffing units, whether it's through like prismatic barriers or post, Battlefield Prowess, obviously. But for now, in the current game, very trash card. I don't know why you would even play it, so 0 stars from me. Next card though, Cataclysm. I kind of like this card. It's a very synergy-oriented card though. 3 mana, slow speed. An ally starts a free attack challenging an enemy. If you are not getting any synergy off of that free challenging attack, however you want to describe it, this is just a 3 mana slow speed single combat if you're not getting any synergy. So what kind of synergy is there? Well, if you use a scout unit to get that free challenge attack, you get an attack token back because of how scouts work. There are some cards that do things that have been released with this set that say if this unit challenges another unit, do a thing. Something like that. Or if you don't even want to go that complex, just use Cataclysm on something that is a good keyword like quick attack or overwhelm or something else. But if you don't do anything synergistic with this card, it's a very underwhelming card. So for that reason, I am a fan of the card, but because of its necessity for synergy, it gets 2 stars from me. I can see it being played in the right deck as a 1 or 2 of, but again, very synergistic, and single combat is kind of a thing. So yeah, 2 stars. Decent, but meh. Ooh, now this card, Dragon Chow. People love this card for how cute he is, and because in the full art he's about to die to a screeching dragon. Dragon Chow, the card itself, is a 1 mana 0/3. When you play a dragon, it strikes me and you draw 1. That's pretty good. The problem is, you have to play dragons, and dragons at the moment are bad. This card is directly tied to how good dragons are, and dragons at the moment are bad. But why is this card good, you might say? Well, a card that basically I guess it does replace itself, but not 100% of the time. But cards that replace themselves a lot of the time are usually semi-playable, and this card usually does. Plus, if you play a dragon and it strikes this, that dragon most likely has Fury. There's only a few dragons that don't have Fury. If you have a Shyvana on the field, Shyvana gets progress towards her level up, which is nice. So very nice card overall. Again, the only thing holding this back is it only really goes in one deck. It's dragons, and dragons are bad. So for that reason, 2 stars from me. If dragons were a little bit better and there were more things in the game to make dragons a little bit better, maybe 3 stars. but only 2 stars for now. The nice thing, though, is your opponent's probably not going to ever remove this card, so it's just going to sit around, so that's nice. If your opponent wastes removal on a Dragon Child, you're probably happy, or scared, because that probably means they have a lot of removal. Next card, Gallant Rider. It's an elite. Lots of elite synergy that Demacia got. 4 mana, 4/4. Okay, stat line for the cost. The first time I challenge an enemy, transform me into Vanguard Cavalry. This is one of the cards that I was talking about in Cataclysm that has some, when I challenge stuff, do stuff. Vanguard Cavalry, as you can see on the bottom left, is a card that already exists in the game. It is the 5 mana 5/5 Wood Tough, still an elite. This is a pretty good elite unit. The elite spot, or the force drop slot in elites, was kind of being held up by, I think, Bannerman, and I can't even remember the name of it. But the 4 mana 2/1 challenger that summons a copy of itself, which is not terrible, but not amazing. And also, if you can quickly transform this into a Vanguard Cavalry, and if you give it Challenger and that Challenger is permanent, this card can easily just take over the board and just dominate the board. The problem is that's asking a lot. So yeah, it doesn't even have to really go in elites. It just needs to get the challenge transformation off. Because sure, its stats is okay for its cost, but right now in Runeterra, we're not really at the point where a card is playable if it has decent stats for the cost. So for those reasons, only 2 stars. Decent card, but it's kind of lacking in a lot of stuff. Next up, ooh, a card I like, Golden Aegis. 4 mana slow spell, give an ally barrier this round. Rally. It is Relentless Pursuit with upside. The trade-off is it costs 1 more mana. That's pretty good. This card is really nice. This doesn't completely power creep out Relentless Pursuit because, well, one, it's more expensive. So a more aggressive deck would probably run Relentless Pursuit because aggro decks are trying to use up all their mana very efficiently in the early game, so that 1 extra mana might be the difference between a win and a loss. But more mid-rangey and even control-y decks that want rally effects might play this. Put Golden Aegis on something that has Challenger. For example, in Shen Fiora, this card's pretty decent. And you can even just put it on something that you want to keep safe, but still attack inwards. Something like Illusion. Even though Illusion decks probably want to run Relentless Pursuit most of the time, this card is really, really good. For that, 4 stars. I really like this card. Next card, though. Another elite. We got Honored Lord. 2 mana, 3/2. Pretty good stat line for its cost. 2 mana, 3/2s are always really nice because they can block fearsomes. As I said before, it's an elite. And he says, the first time I challenge an enemy, give me barrier this round. Okay, not terrible. The only deck that I think really wants this card is a deck that wants elites early. So that's kind of only one deck. But that's still a good card. Needs the right shell to work, but if you can get this guy to work and you can challenge consistently, then a 2 mana 3/2 would challenge your barrier, even if it is only for the round, is pretty strong. And even if you don't get that off, it's still an elite if you have elite synergy, and it's still a 3/2 for 2, which is decent. So I like it. Again, kind of limited in playability though, and the kind of decks it would go in. So only 2 stars from me. Next up, I believe, yes, I had this in the wrong order, by the way. We got Jarvan. Spoiler, he's 3 stars. He's kind of bad. Jarvan the 4th, J4, he's not terrible, which is why he's getting 3 stars. The problem with Jarvan is just, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain why I just don't think he's good. One, he's in Demacia. Demacia is kind of bad. And 2, he has a very high potential, but there's also a very low potential because let's put it this way in this scenario. Let's say you want to attack in, start an open attack, and then do something after your open attack, but you have Jarvan in hand. you can't really do an open attack because it'll automatically summon. I guess I should read Jarvan, by the way. Jarvan is a 6 mana 5/3 with barrier. When you attack, pay my cost to summon me, challenging the strongest enemy. Level up, allies have survived 4+ strikes from enemy blockers. Leveled up Jarvan has a wall of text, still does the whole like attacking, pay cost to summon him. But now at the round start, create a fleeting Cataclysm in hand, and when he challenges an enemy, he gets barrier for the round, and then his champ spell is Cataclysm. As I was saying though, he can make your turns really clunky. I feel like he's at his most powerful on turn 6 into an open attack to burst speed summon him, challenging a strong enemy. He will most likely kill that enemy and maybe even survive if your opponent doesn't have a way to remove the barrier, because a 6 mana 5/3 with barrier is going to kill a lot of things on turn 6. But still, what kind of deck wants this card is the problem. I guess elites, but again, elites are kind of bad. Like maybe some kind of Garen Jarvan deck. There's also Scouts, but Scouts kind of likes Misfortune and Quinn, so Scouts is definitely not removing Misfortune from the deck. So removing Quinn for Jarvan, I don't know if that's even an upgrade. That honestly sounds like a downgrade. So that's why Jarvan J4 only gets 3 stars from me. Powerful card, but it kind of needs a home. And the home that he obviously goes into is Scouts. Sorry, not Scouts. Elites, and Elites are kind of bad. So 3 stars from me. Next up, King Jarvan III. Well, we're just going to keep going on with the Jarvan line here. King Jarvan III is a 7 mana 3/6. Okay, pretty terrible stat line for a 7-drop. What else does he do? Well, he's also tough. Okay, getting a little bit better. When I'm summoned, draw J4. Okay, so draw Jarvan 4 when he's summoned. He's a boat, basically. He's like Leviathan, but for Jarvan. If he's already in play, instead give allies Challenger and Scout this round. So you think of this as kind of a finisher for Jarvan decks. So the problem is, do you want this over, say, like Brightsteel Formation or 6 mana Cythria as a finisher? Maybe, sure. He kind of also draws Jarvan, but you don't. I feel like a Jarvan deck doesn't want to play a card like this to draw up Jarvan. Just a very situational card. I feel like this is a card you don't want to be using to draw Jarvan. You want to be using this card as a way to give allies Challenger and Scout this round, and that's not amazing. And I know some people are like, well, Leviathan's good, so shouldn't Jarvan the Third be good? Well, no, Leviathan's good because, well, one, the Leviathan Swain combo is really powerful. The Jarvan J4 and J3 combo is nowhere near Leviathan Swain. And plus, like, Leviathan's kind of a outlier, in fact. Look at the other boats. They're not really heavily played. The only other one that's even slightly played is, I guess, Tusk Raider, the Sejuani boat. But the other ones are, what? The Misfortune boat, the Siren, I believe, and Dreadway, the Gangplank boat, and neither of them are really played. So, yeah. Very situational card, though. Could be decent if Jarvan gets a good deck as a finisher, but again, like I said, Demacia already has decent finishers in the form of Brightsteel and in the form of Cythria. So for that, 2 stars. Still a powerful effect, but meh. Maybe as a one-of in Jarvan decks. So maybe. Next card. I like this card. I think this card is really strong. Penitent Squire. I've been mentioning how I think elites suck, but this is one of the better cards in elites, and it's not even an elite. Penitent Squire is a 1 mana 2/2. When I'm summoned, if you behold an elite, create a Tattered Banner in hand. I forgot to include what Tattered Banner was on this graphic, by the way. I apologize. Tattered Banner, though, I guess, is a 1 mana 1/1 burst. Or sorry, 1 mana 1/1. It's a 1 mana burst spell. There we go. That says the next unit you will summon this turn has Challenger, and it's permanent. So that's pretty good. Already, what we know is that, just from looking at the card, really good stat line. Cythria is sometimes played just because she's a 1 mana 2/2. Sure, in comparison to Cythria is an elite. Penitent Squire is not. But thanks to cards like Honored Lord, and if you're playing this card, you might even play 1 mana Cythria as well, you will probably be able to get this card active all the time. In other words, you'll get the Tattered Banner. And Tattered Banner is really good for activating all those challenger synergies. So, big fan of the card. Really, really powerful. The issue again is that elites are kind of bad. And this deck, thanks to having to behold an elite, really only goes in elite decks. But even in those decks, really powerful, even if the deck itself is not powerful. So for that reason, 4 whole stars for Penitent Squire. Oh, and this card. Last card for Demacia. It's kind of meh. Towering Stonehorn. 6 mana 7/7. I don't take damage from enemy spells or skills. That's it. Really big stats for the cost. The problem is it doesn't really do anything. No real cool keyword, no special effect. Like, sure, it doesn't take damage from skills or spells or enemy skills or spells, but okay, the problem is when you're playing things that cost 6 or more mana, you're kind of trying to end the game or stabilize the game if you're not the aggro player. This doesn't do either of those things. Again, I mentioned it before, the problem is Cythria and to a lesser extent Genevieve or Genevieve, however you want to pronounce it, kind of take up the 6 mana slot in Demacia, and Towering Stonehorn compared to those is not even anywhere close. So I think this card is mostly just here for Expedition. Not really playable in Constructed. 1 star though, because I think it is solid in the right deck. I just don't know what deck that is. Because it does have good stats for the cost. I don't get that wrong. Sometimes good stats for the cost can carry a card to playability. I don't think this is going to get carried to playability. Next region, though, we have Freljord. Starting up with Freljord, we have a pretty mediocre card. We have Ancestral Boon. Ancestral Boon is a 2 mana burst speed spell. Grant the top ally in your deck +2/+2. Okay, pretty nice, but meh. But if you're enlightened, instead, grant all allies in your deck +2/+2. Okay, that's a little bit better. Here is the issue. What kind of deck wants this? Enlightenment or Enlighten Freljord's not really a thing. Like, I guess you could argue, like, well, you could ramp and then play this. But here's the other issue. It's slow. Like, this is really slow, even for a ramp deck. Because you can, for ramp decks, they're slow, but they don't need to, they're slow in a different way. They're slow because they're trying to buy time to ramp. This card is slow in that it's slow because it needs to ramp up or just play the game naturally and get to 10 or get enlightened, play this card, and then actually draw the cards that get buffed. So, meh. Again, I don't know what kind of deck wants this, but it is powerful. The issue is, like, when you're enlightened, you're trying to, like, win the game, and giving everything in your deck +2/+2 is not really winning the game. But maybe in the right deck, I can see it being played. So for that reason, I'm going to give it 1 star. But again, I don't really know what kind of deck wants it. Anyway, though. Oh, this card. This is a nice one. One of the best cards in the set, in my opinion. We got Blighted Ravine. It's a landmark. 4 mana landmark. When I'm summoned, heal your Nexus for 4. Countdown 1, deal 2 to everything. That's really, really, really good. Obviously it's in the slot that Avalanche takes, but you can obviously just play both. In some situations it's better than Avalanche, in some situations it's worse. It's really nice when you play it because it kind of stops your opponent from just developing more of the board. The other issue is, compared to Avalanche, it doesn't kill things, so your opponent sees this on the field, and then they just hit you really hard or play a lot of units that hit you really hard. Also, it deals 2 to everything, not just the units on board. It also hits Nexus, so that heal 4 is kind of really just a heal 2. So, meh. I guess you can also argue it triggers Plunder. So that's a nice side effect. But still, this is a really good card. A little extra healing from more control decks. Little extra board clear for them as well. So really, really nice. Discard aggro players are mad at this card. 4 stars. Really, really nice. Next card. Oh, the worst card. Oh, no. Not the worst card in the set. I don't know actually what the worst card in the set is, in my opinion, but this is in contention for it. Cold Resistance, the worst Freljord card we've gotten. I don't know what deck wants this. Cold Resistance is a 5-mana burst speed spell. Get an empty mana gem and grant an ally +0/+2. Here's the problem. Catalyst of Aeons pretty much does the same exact thing, except instead of giving the health buff, you get to heal for 3. The heal for 3 is, I'd say, like 99% of the time, a lot better than a random combat trick. Sure, I guess you could argue like it's a permanent health buff, but I don't know what kind of deck wants to be ramping and playing a buff spell, because this kind of ramp spell wants to be played on around turn 3. So that means you can only really place you can only spend 1 mana, so you can have 5 mana by turn 3. So what are you gonna do? Cold Resistance and ramp and buff what, an Omen Hawk or maybe a Hapless Aristocrat or something? That sounds terrible. And I guess in the late game it's a little bit better than Catalyst, but even in the late game, Catalyst still gets value thanks to its heal. And you might say, why not run both? Well, if you want more ramp, you have things like Warding Stones, Faces of the Old Ones, and Voices of the Old Ones. So it's not like ramp needs more ramp. So I don't think even ramp decks want this. I don't think any deck wants this card. For that reason, and just that I think it's a bad card, 0 stars from me. The only way I see this card get played is if Legends of Runeterra implements some kind of rotation and Catalyst of Aeons rotates out. So, but you still want to play a 5-mana burst speed ramp spell. That's the only way I see this card getting ever played. Anyway, though. Next up, we got a good card. We got Draklorn Inquisitor. When I'm summoned, summon a Frozen Thrall. It's also a 5-mana 4/5. Really nice stats for the cost. 4-mana 4/5s are pretty decent for their cost, and this thing still has a good stat line, and its ability is pretty good. Also, round end. If the countdown of any of your Frozen Thralls is 4 or less advanced than 0, Frozen Thralls are 1-mana landmarks. We'll talk about these more later. There are 1-mana landmarks that say countdown 8, summon a Frostguard Thrall. Frostguard Thralls are 8-mana 8/8s with Overwhelm. Really nice card. Very, very powerful enabler for Lysandra, who we'll look at later, and Frozen Thralls in general. The fact that it summons one itself really, really makes it playable. The issue is it kind of only goes into Frozen Thrall deck, which is not a bad thing, but you're not going to play this in some like Freljord Shadow Isles control or anything. So a good card that's a little unflexible, whatever you want to say. So for that reason, 3 whole stars. Good card, but lack of flexibility keeps it from getting any higher. Next up, Entomb. I don't know about this card. 5-mana fast speed spell. Obliterate a unit and summon a frozen tomb in its place. Frozen Tomb, as you can see on the left side, is a landmark that is 0 mana that says countdown 2, summon an exact copy of the obliterated unit I replaced. Not really a strong card. The only reason I think this is somewhat playable is that it gives Freljord a way to get rid of a unit. Sure, it's only temporary, but Freljord has kind of struggled to get rid of big units because they've only had like combat and avalanches, and I guess you can argue Sejuani. But most of the time they would rely on their secondary region to get rid of big units. Still, though, I don't think this card is good. There is some cute stuff you can do by transforming a unit into a landmark and then trying to do stuff with that landmark. The issue with that is then you open yourself up to landmark removal. Basically, think Scorched Earth. So be careful with this card if you decide to play it. So for that reason, I'm going to give it 2 stars because it does something that Freljord doesn't really do a lot of the time. So 2 stars for me. Next up, though, we have Frozen Thrall. As we were saying earlier, we're going to talk about it now. Frozen Thrall, we've talked about it. It's 1 mana landmark, countdown 8, summon the Frostguard Thrall, which is an 8-mana 8/8 Overwhelm. The problem with this is while it's a good card, you don't really want to main deck it because it kind of doesn't do much by itself, especially in the late game. And plus, the cards in the kind of deck that a Frozen Thrall deck would play also generate Frozen Thralls. Think the Inquisitor and Lysandra themselves. So I don't think you should play 3 of these, maybe only 2 or even 1, but you also really want to play 1 on turn 1 to try and get the Draklord Inquisitor going, so it's kind of weird. But outside of the Lysandra, Draklord Inquisitor, whatever, Frozen Thrall decks, no other deck wants this card, so for that reason, while it's powerful, little inflexible, and even then, it's not even that amazing in the deck it goes in, so 2 stars for me. Next up, Ice Shard. I really underestimated this card. I might still be underestimating it, in all honesty. Ice Shard is a 3-mana fast speed spell. Deal 1 to everything. Basically, it says no to Fizz and to Burblefish. Really nice. Really good card against just Swarm decks in general. So besides just Fizz, TF, Spiders, even though they're not great, discard aggro, it kind of makes Cry a little bit. Hits Nexus decks as well, so that's nice for Plunder. It even has a little bit of synergy with things like Scargrounds and Crimson decks, so there's that, even though that deck is kind of bad. Very powerful card overall. Just fast speed is what makes it good, in all honesty. Fast speed AoE is just so nice. So for that reason, 3 stars. Honestly, I think I'm still underestimating this card. I could see myself putting this at 4 stars in the future, but for now, only 3 stars because it doesn't do much against certain decks. Like in some matchups, especially control matchups, it's just a dead card. So for that reason, 3 stars only. Now the next one, we've talked about her a little bit. The Champion of Freljord, Lysandra, 3 mana, 2/3 tough. Very small stats for her cost. When I'm summoned, summon a Frozen Thrall. Okay, pretty nice. Level up, you've summoned 2 allies that cost 8+. When I level up, create a Watcher in hand. We can see the Watcher over there on the left. It is a 17 mana, 11/17. Really big stats, really big cost. Such a big cost you can't summon it normally. So how do you summon it? Well, it says it costs 0. If you have summoned 4+ allies that cost 8 this game, attack, obliterate the enemy deck. That's why it costs a lot. There's a lot of combos you can do with this kind of card. We should talk about Lysandra's level up form first real quick. Her leveled up form, basically now she just starts at the round start, she just now creates a fleeting 0-cost Ice Shard. That's pretty much the only change. That and the +1/+1, of course. But still, the Watcher has some pretty cool combos. You have things like Revitalizing Roar to make it 0 mana, the Spectral Matron, I would think is her name, to make an ephemeral copy of this and summon it. So there's a lot of cute ways to cheat out Watcher. You could just go more control-y and just naturally play cards and summon the Watcher. You could also try and play things like Retreat on Trundle Ice Pillar to replay Ice Pillars numerous times to play Watcher. Very, very powerful effect. So very, very versatile card. The issue with Lysandra, in my opinion, is unlike a card like TF or Aphelios, she doesn't demand removal right away, unlike a lot of other champions. And in the late game, like the super late game, she's not that amazing outside of the Watcher, in case you top deck her. But the Watcher is pretty good in the late game. So for those reasons, though, I think she's great, but only 4 stars. She falls short of the 5th star because, like I said earlier, compared to TF and Aphelios and other cards like, I guess, Zoe, she doesn't really demand interaction right away. Now, the next card, Spoils of War. The card I think is actually good. The problem is it's in Freljord. Spoils of War is a 3-mana burst speed spell. Grant an ally +1/+2. Plunder. Grant +2/+4 instead. It's a permanent buff, which is always a great thing. The issue is you have to activate Plunder, I believe, or else the card is a little mediocre. 3 mana for +1/+2 is really meh. While 3 mana for +2/+4 is really good. You kind of want to use this, though, during combat, so it's kind of hard to activate Plunder. The other issue, like I said, is it's in Freljord. Freljord is the region with some of the best combat tricks in the game. Think things like Troll Chance, Elixir of Irons, and Freezes in general. So it's kind of hard to fit a card like this into the deck. I feel like if this card was in a different region, it would be a much, much better card. But because it's in Freljord, that holds it back a lot. So for that reason, it gets 1 star. If you can somehow consistently activate Plunder before combat to hold this up, then sure, maybe. And I guess Ember Maiden can do that. So maybe in like an Ember Maiden Scargrounds deck, you can use this. But then at that point, why not just play Take Heart, right? Again, it's just like I said, Freljord just has so many combat tricks that are just so much better than this thing. Anyway, though, last card for Freljord. It's a good one. It's Three Sisters. Three Sisters is a 1-mana burst speed spell. Create a fleeting Flash Freeze, Fury of the North, or Entomb in hand. We can see all the spells over here on the left. I love cards like this. I love cards that give you options and give you versatility. You are basically paying a 1-mana tax to have versatility. Sure, it's fleeting, so you can't just be like, oh, I'll invest 1 mana now to put a Fury in my hand for the rest of the game or something. You have to cast it when it is played. So again, kind of meh. None of the spells are that amazing, but again, the strength of this card is its versatility. Really powerful. Another issue is that while Fury and Flash Freeze are really, really good, even though I just said none of these are that amazing, Entomb is kind of bad, and very, very rarely you're going to ever pick Entomb. But still, again, like I keep saying, the versatility is so good. There are some situations where you're like, okay, I really just need to get a big unit out of the way, and I can't freeze it or beat it in combat even with Fury. So Entomb to get out of the way for now. But yeah, so yeah. Flexibility, versatility, huge upside for cards. For that reason, 4 stars, even though none of the cards are too game breaking. It's carried by the versatility. Next up, that's all the cards for Freljord. Let's head to Ionia next. Poor Ionia. Poor Ionia. First off, it didn't get any new champions, so it only got 2 new cards, and both of the cards are kind of meh. Field Musicians, that was the first one. It's not that meh, it just doesn't have a good home. There's potential for this card. Field Musicians is a 4-mana 1/4 with a tune. Each round, once you've summoned 3 other allies, refill your spell mana and draw 1. That's a really powerful engine. The problem is, what deck wants this kind of card? It doesn't really fit into any existing shell already. And the other issue is, I feel like if you're going to play a card like this, you want to take advantage of that spell mana refueling. And Ionia's spells, for the most part, are more reactive than proactive. And I feel like if you're refilling spell mana, you want to have proactive spells. So I think the secondary region has to do that. So what region do you want? And what deck wants this? Plus, it is kind of hard to activate. Summoning 3 allies in 1 round is really tough. Even with ephemerals, like, I don't know, Zed is a little tough. I guess you could use, like, some of the new Shurima cards too, but it's really tough. Very, very high potential with this card, though, but just no one wants it. So I'm going to give this thing 3 stars purely on the potential alone for being game-breaking, because refilling spell mana and drawing an extra card, drawing that 1 a turn, is really powerful. Next card, Shadow Apprentice. I'm not the biggest fan of this card. 1 mana, 1/1 elusive. Okay. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+1 if an ally has ephemeral. Are they trying to bring back Ionia elusives? Because if so, this is not the card for it. Even in that deck, I guess it's not amazing. You have what? I can't even remember the name of the card. Navori Highwayman? Blade Master? The 1 mana 2/1 that gets elusive on the turn you summon it. Fights for the spot. And then you have the Mentor, the 1 mana 2/1 that gives something in hand +1/+0 when you summon it, which is also not that amazing. Plus, if you summon this on turn 1, you basically summon a 1 mana 1/1 elusive, which is not unplayable. The Cutthroat in Bilgewater is a 1 mana 1/1 elusive with Fearsome, but that's mostly played to try and power level up Gangplank, so I don't know what kind of card what kind of deck exactly wants this. Ephemerals are struggling, elusives are struggling, but if you can somehow get this off consistently, It's a 1-mana 2/2 elusive, which is really nice. So for that reason, 2 stars. The decks it wants to be in are struggling, and even in those kind of decks, it's tough for it to actually be active. Anyway, though, let's get out of Ionia. I don't like being in Ionia. It makes me sad because I love Ionia. We got Noxus next up. Noxus got a bunch of new cards and a champion, of course, so they have a lot of cards. First up, we have Black Rose Spy, 2 mana, 3/2, Reputation. When I'm summoned, transform me into an exact copy of the strongest ally that struck this round. A very situational card, but at its worst, it's a 2 mana, 3/2, which is almost always fine because of it's a decent stat line for its cost and it can block Fearsome, so that's nice. But this is one of the ways you can get 2 of the same champion on the field. So this, in other words, this can copy champions. Copying champions is really good. For example, I don't know what kind of deck would play Targon Noxus, but copying an Aurelion Soul on the field, or copying, I don't know, let's not even go too big, maybe Tryndamere, or a Twisted Fate, or a Felios, or Zoe. Getting multiple copies of a champion on the field is really good, so Black Rose Spy, I think, has a lot of potential. Kind of a little clunky, though, and a little work needs to be done, but still, very high ceiling of potential and power. For that, 3 stars. Next card. I like this card. Bloody Business. 4 mana fast spell. An ally with 5+ power strikes an enemy. It's kind of like Concerted Strike, but not as good. And here's the thing, though. Concerted Strike's a really good card. Pretty much only for Reputation decks, and I guess, like, to a lesser extent, Ash Sejuani, or just Ash in general. In other words, decks with really high statted units. But still, even in those decks, it's very efficient. Fast speed is really, really good, of course. But outside of those decks, meh. So I don't know. There's not much to talk about with this card. It's not that much to analyze here. So for those reasons, 3 stars. Very powerful effect, but it doesn't go into too many decks. Only a couple of decks like this card. Next up, though, Crimson Bloodletter, 1 mana, 1/2. The next time you summon another ally, deal 1 to it, and grant me +1/+1. Crimson decks, Scarground decks, I guess to a lesser extent, Swain decks like this card. The problem is the Crimson decks and Scarground decks are very much in a bad spot right now. They're struggling right now. I guess also I mentioned Crimson, but also Vladimir too. That's kind of implied. Still though, even if those decks are struggling, this is a very good card and it's doing its best to try to carry the archetype. It's not enough, in my opinion, to carry the archetype to relevancy, but still very powerful. 1 mana, 1/2. Becoming a 2/3, really good stat line for the cost. Activating Scarground or Crimson self-damaging synergy is really, really good. So for that reason, 3 stars. Only really goes in a couple of decks, and it kind of sucks in the late game when you top deck this, when you're trying to top deck some real good cards, but outside of that, really nice card. Next up, we got the Champion of Noxus. We got LeBlanc. Very boring card. Somewhat controversial because of how boring she is, but as for the card itself, very, very good. She is a 3 mana 5/2 with quick attack. To level her up, she has to see you deal 15. She is in the Draven slot and competing against Draven for very similar decks, but I think she's still good enough. Her leveled up form, by the way, is 3 mana 6/3, still has quick attack. And now whenever she sees you deal 15 damage, she creates a mirror image in hand, and if you already have one in hand, reduce its cost by 1 instead. Mirror Image is a 2 mana slow spell. Summon an exact ephemeral copy of an ally with 5+ power, so you can make more and more LeBlancs. Pretty good. Her champion spell, by the way, is Sigil of Malice, 4 mana fast speed spell, reputation, I cost 1, deal 2 to anything. It's Mystic Shot. So again, the problem is she fights for Darius' slot in decks, but because of her stat line, She works good in reputation decks or just decks that care about 5+ attack in general, because it's kind of hard to get things on the board that have 5 or more attack as early as turn 3. So she's very playable, very boring again, like I said, but very aggro card. Sure, Dice the Mystic Shot is an argument, but still really strong card. And an okay champ spell. Not an amazing champ spell, but it's a slightly overcosted Mystic Shot that gets better in the late game. But the problem is Mystic Shot is bad in the late game. I guess you can hit face with it. Anyway, though, for that reason, 4 stars. Very boring card, but boring does not mean bad. And just like interesting cards doesn't mean good. So 4 stars for LeBlanc. Next up, we have Mimic. Mimic is a 3-mana burst speed spell. Reputation, I cost 1. Pick a spell in play or in hand and create a fleeting copy of it in hand. Like a lot of reputation cards, overcosted without reputation active. The problem with this is I think reputation decks are very limited with slots in the deck that are basically not helping activate reputation early, or are just not units in general, or removal, I guess. And this card doesn't really do much. Like, it's kind of like Spell Thief, but nowhere near Spell Thief's goodness, if that makes sense. There are some cute combos as well, of course. And I also like, unlike Spell Thief, the copy you get is fleeting, so that's also bad. But yeah, there are some cute combos you can do, like some Ezreal Victor combo. You have a leveled up Ezreal and a leveled up Victor. You have reputation active. You have 2 mimics in hand, and then you just like play a infinite amount of mimics until your opponent dies. Good luck actually achieving that in a game, though, but it's a thing. Still, though, I think there's a little bit of potential here with this card, but again, just not good enough in my opinion. I just don't think reputation decks want a card like this is the problem. Anyway, though, next card is Shrieking Spinner. 4 mana, 2/5. It's a spider. Attack, grant spider allies +1/+0. It's only for spider decks and aggro spiders at that. You might say, like, well, streamer, aren't all spider decks aggro spider decks? Yes, but who knows, in the future there might be more control or even mid-rangey spider decks. A long time ago there was like a more mid-rangey spider decks, if I remember correctly, with, I want to say, Dawn Speakers. That was more mid-rangey. But this is definitely for more of an aggro spider deck. And the problem with this card, I think, while it's a very strong card in a vacuum, you have to think to yourself, like, you're already playing Noxus. What else is in the 4 mana slot in Noxus that's also really good in aggro? It's Crowd Favorite is the answer. And Crowd Favorite wants you to basically flood the board and spam the board. Same as Shrieking Spinner wants you to flood and spam the board with spiders. In my opinion, if you're flooding the board with stuff, I feel like Crowd Favorite is a better payoff than Shrieking Spinner. Maybe if Shrieking Spinner had another keyword like Fearsome, maybe, but I'd rather get one really big unit with Overwhelm, that's his keyword, than potentially giving all of my spiders +1/+0. Sure, it's permanent and it affects itself, but one, you have to attack in as well, so it doesn't play around stuns. So, Arachnoid Sentry is a thing. But yeah, I don't know. Really only for spiders. But maybe you play it both with or you play this with Crowd Favorite and itself in a spider deck. Still, though, 2 stars for me. Very limited in its deck choices. And even in the decks it wants to be in, it's not even that amazing. Next up, we got Sigil of Malice. We talked about this a little with LeBlanc. 4 mana fast speed spell, reputation, I cost 1, deal 2 to anything. Again, it is Mystic Shot. That's overcosted until you activate reputation. The problem with a card like this is this kind of card, Mystic Shot basically, is a card you want to have played early. Because Mystic Shot gets worse and worse as time goes on, in my opinion. Sure, in the late game it can be used for burn, but meh, you want to use it in the early game to remove small problematic stuff. Think like Twisted Fate and Zoe. And the other issue is you are definitely not keeping this in your opening hand. You are going to mulligan this away every single time, I would say. So I don't know why you would ever play this unless you're really desperate for wanting Mystic Shot in your deck and you're not playing Piltover and Zon. 1 star. Kind of meh. Next up. Oh, this is a meme. Strength in Numbers. 8 mana slow spell. Summon 2 Legion Marauders. Legion Marauders are 3 mana 3/2s that say attack, grant allied Legion Marauders everywhere, +1/+1. I don't think I need to talk about why this card is bad too much, but again, I'll talk about it a little bit. 8 mana slow spell that only summons 2 3/2s. Sure, they do stuff on attack, but you can do a lot better for 8 mana. 0 stars from me. Maybe if Legion Marauders get even more support, you can use this as a one-of in a Legion Marauders deck, but that deck's not a thing yet. So again, 0 stars. Kind of bad. Next up, Thorn of the Rose. 3 mana 5/1. When I'm summoned, create a Guile in hand. Guile is a 1 mana slow spell that says stun an enemy. It's already in the game, but a lot of people actually didn't know it was already in the game because it's that bad of a card. I guess if you want to play Guile in your deck, you don't have to actually play Guile, and you can play this instead. And obviously the idea is like, oh, Yasuo decks. Those are also really bad. The one nice thing, I guess, is if you play this card, your opponent might attack in right away because they'll be afraid of you playing Guile on something and stunning something scary. And the other thing is, it is a 5 attack unit, so it helps activate Reputation, and it has synergy with things like Bloody Business and, I guess, Trifarian Assessor. The other issue is it's just a bad card. 5/1 stat line for 3 mana is really weak. It just dies to a soft breeze. And in the same exact slot as it, you have Arachnoid Sentry if you're looking for a stun as a Yasuo deck, so meh. I guess if you could argue like it creates a card, so you can use that for discarding stuff with like Rummage, I guess, but I feel like there's better cards for that, like Ballistic Bot. Sure, different regions and all, but still. For that reason, it's only going to get 2 stars from me. I think it has potential. The issue is the decks that this card would go in are bad. Anyway, though, last card of the Noxus cards, and honestly, maybe the most powerful of the cards. It's Whispered Words, 4 mana, burst speed spell, Reputation, I cost 2, draw 2. A very boring card. Not much to unpack here with this card, but it's super, super good. Even if you're not getting the Reputation cost off, it's still decent. People will play Salvage, the 4 mana cost 2, draw 2, just to draw 2. That's how good 4 mana burst speed draw 2 is. And obviously, if you can get Reputation off, it gets even more nutty, but it's still a really, really good card. This lets Noxus decks. This makes it so Noxus decks don't have to necessarily play other regions to get their card draw. They don't have to go and look at Shadow Isles for Glimpse or PNZ for, I guess, Rummages. So really nice card. Not much to talk about it. 4 mana draw 2 is a good effect. 4 stars from me. Speaking of PNZ, let's head to PNZ now and look at their cards. We got the first card, Concurrent Timelines. This has been a very controversial card. A lot of people are upset about this. The reason is, let me read the card first. Concurrent Timelines is a 1 mana slow spell that says, for the rest of the game, the first time you play a follower each round, pick one of 3 followers with the same cost to transform it into. So, if you don't know why this card is causing controversy, it is because of Commander Ladros. You play this card, then you play Commander Ladros. Commander Ladros' ability will go on the stack, and then you will transform Commander Ladros. If you transform Commander Ladros into the Dreadway, his ability still hasn't gone off, and now you have a Dreadway on the field, doubling Commander Ladros' ability to basically one-shot your opponent. That's the combo. That's why it's very controversial. And the reason it's controversial is because while that combo is annoying to lose to, it's not actually that good. Its win rate's not that high compared to a lot of other meta decks. But a lot of people are already calling for a nerf, and the reason is for fun. It's not a fun deck to play against, and there is precedence for nerfing cards and balancing cards because of fun and not necessarily because of win rates and competitiveness. Anyway, though, outside of the combo, the card is still pretty decent because you can use it to summon or to transform cards that have good summon abilities, but their bodies may be a little mediocre. For example, the Thorn of the Rose is a 3-mana 5/1. That's not a good body, but summoning that card gives you a Guile. Chomp Wump is another decent one. You still get the 2 mushrooms, the puff caps, and you can transform that 3-mana 4/3 or the 4-mana 4/3 into a different 4-drops, maybe something better. For that reason, I like the card. I think it has some potential. 4 stars right now because of the combo and because it has potential even outside of the combo. Anyway, though, enough rambling about this card. Let's go to the next one. Oh, it's Production Surge. 0-mana slow spell. This card is not as good as Concurrent Timelines. Production Surge is a 0-mana slow spell that says to play, spend all of your mana. Think Thermogenic Beam. Summon random turrets whose total cost equal the mana spent. You might say to yourself, oh, this is a Heimerdinger card. Kind of. You can use it to power level up Heimerdinger, but honestly, leveling up Heimerdinger is not even that amazing. And the other reason I don't like this card is RNG. You don't really know what you're going to get. Obviously, you can try to mitigate the RNG a little bit by casting it at a certain time when you have a certain amount of mana, but that's a little easier said than done. And even then, you're still RNG. And then the turrets themselves are usually every single turret outside of the, I guess, 8-mana 8/8 turret. None of the turrets are worth their cost. You're summoning like 3-mana 3/1s, 4-mana 4/1s. Sure, they have nice keywords and all, but still. The only deck I kind of like this in, I don't even really like this that much in Heimerdinger decks because, well, one, Heimerdinger decks are bad. But the one deck I do like this in is a more spell-heavy control deck, as it's a way to summon units without playing units, if that makes sense. Think like Karina control. The problem is, Karina control is really, really bad. 1 star for me. Really just because of that, the whole reason I just said about how summoning units in a unit light spell heavy kind of deck. Let's head to Shadow Isles. They got one of my favorite champions too. Shadow Isles got a bunch of stuff. They also got a new keyword, Slay. Starting off Shadow Isles, we have a pretty mediocre card though. It is the Ether Fiend or Ether Fiend, however you want to pronounce it. It is a 7-mana 6/4 fearsome. Play, kill an ally to kill an enemy. It's Crumble on a stick. Crumble's not a great card. Crumble also hits landmarks, and this only hits enemies, not landmarks. So no, thank you. Even the body itself isn't that amazing. 7 mana for a 6/4 is not great. The only thing I really like about this card is it activates Slay while also developing the board, but even then it's kind of meh. Maybe as a one-of, just to try and help activate Slay in the late game. That's the only reason I think this deck is somewhat playable. 1 star from me. Next up, we got a pretty nice card, Fading Icon, 2-mana 3/1. When I'm summoned, summon a Prey. Prey, as you can see on this left, is a 0-mana 0/1. I like this card. It's not that versatile. It only really goes in decks that can make use of the 0/1. Some people are like, oh, this is House Spider for Shadow Isles. It is not House Spider. House Spider is creating a 2/2 and a 1/1. Sure, that stat line's almost the same, but a 1/1 is so much better than a 0/1, and a 2/2 is, on average, better than a 3/1, sure. 3/1s can block fearsomes, but they also die to things like Withering Whales and Vile Feast and other such things. But if you can make use of the Prey, this card is really good. It's at its worst, the Prey is always a chump blocker. You really want to use the Prey as sacrifice fodder for things like Glimpse, and I believe it's called Spirit Leech. We'll look at that card later on. So yeah, I like the card for that reason. 3 stars for me. Fairly decent card. It's a good it plays a role and it does it well, but nothing too impressive about it. Next up, as I was saying, favorite champs in the set, I would say. I think this is my favorite champ in the set. I'm trying to think of all the champs right now in my head real quick, and I think Kindred is my favorite. Kindred has a lot going for them. They are a 5-mana 4/4 with quick attack. The first time you slay a unit each round, I mark the weakest enemy. Round end. Kill units with my mark. That's insane. That's really, really good. Level up. I've seen you slay 2 units with my mark. Okay, what does leveled up Kindred do? Well, let's see. Still the whole marking and slaying stuff, but now when you slay a unit for the first time in the round, Kindred gets +2/+2. So they will start to grow and get bigger and bigger, which is not amazing, but you know, it's pretty good. Their champ spell is also Spirit Journey, which is not a great spell to have, but it's not an unplayable spell like some champions have for their champ spells. Spirit Journey is a 5-mana fast spell that says kill a unit, then revive it. Pretty useful for basically disrupting removal and stuff. So you can also use it on enemy units to pseudo stun them. So it's kind of nice. Really, really good card. Kind of keeps kind of the glue that keeps Slay decks together. Kindred is really slow. Honestly, maybe a little overrated. I think Kindred is really good. But again, really slow card, takes a little bit of time to get value. Kind of just a card that is not really the deck or the card that's going to win the game, but it's the card to basically hold down the fort while you get your win con together. So for that reason, only 4 stars, because Kindred's really annoying, but your opponent can try and do some stuff to make it so the marks aren't too problematic. Plus, if your opponent removes Kindred after the mark, then the unit that was marked doesn't die anymore. Whether that is through disjointing it by playing like a Will of Ionia or just killing Kindred, then yeah. So again, 4 stars. Still, I love the card. But again, I think Kindred might be a little overrated in the community still. But they are very fun card. Wow, I can't speak English today. Next up, Lamb's Respite. I don't know about this card. It's a combo card. I'll say that much. 2-mana slow spell. Give the weakest ally. I can't take damage or die this round. So the idea is you use Lamb's Respite, then you play a bunch of stuff to kill a unit to do a thing, targeting the unit that got hit by Lamb's Respite. So you get all those killing units to do a thing triggers off without actually killing a unit. Think like glimpses and stuff. And yes, glimpse will work on a unit that cannot die. This is unless they've changed it, because you could use that. You could use Unyielding Spirit on an enemy to make it so it can't die or take damage, and then you could try to glimpse the unit, and glimpse would still go off, but the unit wouldn't die, and you would still draw 2 cards. Though there is something cute you can do. You can play Out of the Way. I keep mentioning Out of the Way for random cards, but Out of the Way makes it so this buff is permanent, so that's pretty cool. And if you can somehow get this on a very scary unit, like on Kindred themselves, that is a pretty nice buff. But again, that's a 2-card combo that's not really helping develop the board. So I feel like if you're going to try and do that, you need other kind of buffs too. So yeah, for that reason, from me, 1 star. That 1 star is purely because of potential, because this kind of effect can be scary with the right cards and the right combo. But for now, I don't think it's good. Next up, Mask Mother. 2-mana 2/2, fearsome. Play. Kill an ally to grant me its stats and keywords. Pretty good card for fearsomes. Lets you just, first off, activate things that want to die, like Cursed Keeper. And it lets you put stats or transfer stats from a non-fearsome unit to a fearsome unit if you want to do that, and get the keywords as well. From like an ephemeral unit, let's say like you have some ephemeral units that you just want to die, and then you use this, like you play Shark Chariot and you don't want to attack in with Shark Chariot, instead you can put the stats on a Mask Mother. It kills, like I said, it kills things that want to die, so Undying. It activates Slay too for Kindred. So all over, there's a lot of potential, but nothing too amazing. So only 2 stars from me. A lot of those decks and combos I said are just not that good. And the ones that are good have in my honest opinion, better ways. Like Kindred has better ways to kill stuff, and Undying is just bad. So really only Fearsome likes this deck, I'd say. If Undying becomes good, I think this deck or this card would be good in Undying though, but Undying's still bad. Next up, Sea Scarab. This card, I don't know if it's good or bad. I think it's a decent card, I'd say. A lot of people don't like this card because it ruins, not ruins, but it makes sea monsters a little worse because of Slaughter Docks and Y'all Hunters, whatever. The 3-mana 4/1, when you summon it, it puts a sea monster into your hand. And getting Sea Scarab off of Jawl Hunters or Slaughter Dogs is really bad. But as for the card itself, what is it? A 2-mana 1/2 with Deep. When another ally dies or Last Breath tossed 1. Cool. Like, it helps you get deep. I don't even know if I want to say quicker, but it helps you, unlike other ways you get deep quickly, it does have some potential in the late game, because in the late game it's a 2-mana 4/5, but again, it's not what deep needs. Like, deep's fine in the early game tossing and stuff to get deep. The biggest issue with deep, I think, is a lack of an identity, in my opinion. They don't really know what they're trying to do. Is deep a mid-range deck who has an explosive, like, turns 8 or so? Are they a control deck trying to control the game? Are they an atrocity deck? I feel like they just need a better, like, identity, and this card doesn't help them because all this does is just toss more cards. Pretty nice for Maokai, I guess. Like, this lets you play Maokai without playing deep. You could have done that before, but this helps out those very, very fringe Maokai decks. So that's something. Anyway, though, I don't know about this card. Only really goes in deep, even though I just said it goes in Maokai decks as well. But Maokai decks that are not deep decks are mostly just memes. 2 stars for me. It's not what deep needed. Deep just needs more identity. Anyway, though, next card, Song of the Isles. I don't know about this card. 2-mana burst speed spell, grant an ally lifesteal, fearsome, and ephemeral. Those are permanent buffs, by the way. The issue is ephemeral. If you can somehow do something with the ephemeral, then you have something that has lifesteal and fearsome for the rest of the game. Say like Deathmark from Ionia to remove ephemeral. The problem is we had Mark of the Isles to do that as well. So yeah, I don't know what kind of deck wants this. You have Mark of the Isles if you wanted to give something ephemeral to try and activate ephemeral stuff like Shark Chariots, I guess. It could be used to like give you a really big heal if you put it on a big unit, but meh. So yeah, I don't even know. I don't think even ephemeral decks want this. And of course, you can use it on like a Mask Mother target, like on whatever you're going to use to kill with Mask Mother to give Mask Mother lifesteal. She already has fearsome anyway, though. But even then, that's not great. So I don't know. 1 star from me because it does give ephemeral, and I think that has some potential behind it, but I don't think it's great. Next up, Soul Spinner. 3-mana 3/2. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+1 and fearsome if an ally died this round. It is also a spider. The issue I have with this card, first off, is it's in spiders, or it is a spider, so it kind of wants to be in a spider deck, and those are aggro decks. I feel like an aggro deck would want to play a 3-drop before combat on turn 3 instead of just open attacking, but even then, it's kind of tough to activate. Sure, you have, I guess, the Butcher, whatever his name is, a 0-mana 3/2 to try and activate this. But even then, it's a little tough. And even if you do activate this, it's not that impressive. Like, sure, a 3-mana 4/3 with fearsome's decent, but it's really annoying to activate this card. So because of that, 1 star. I don't think any deck really wants this kind of card, and the decks that in theory would want this card, I feel have better cards that they can play. Next up, Spirit Journey. We've talked about this a little with Kindred. It is a 5-mana fast spell. Kill a unit, then revive it. I like it. Not a very strong card, but there's flexibility, like I said earlier, about like killing one of your units, then reviving it to disjoin kill spells, using it on enemy units to try and pseudo stun them, killing a unit to activate Last Breath, activate Slay, and then the revive to activate summon abilities again. So lots of cute synergies. Also kills a champion if you need to kill a champion with to activate Rekindler. So like Anivia likes this, so that's kind of cute with Anivia. But again, little expensive for this effect, and I feel like it's expensive because of the versatility. So for that, 2 stars. I think it's a 1 of, maybe a 2 of in certain decks that don't want to play Kindred but still want this ability. Next up, Spirit Leech. I like this card. 4 mana, 4/1, play, kill an ally to draw 2. It is Glimpse Beyond on a stick. It's also a Glimpse Beyond that can't be stopped by your opponent removing whatever you're trying to kill. The only issue is sometimes you just don't have a unit that you want to kill, but you want to still play Spirit Leech just to, well, 1, develop the board and draw your cards. So could be a little clunky, and it only really goes into like sacrifice decks, slay decks, maybe token decks as extra card draw. I've seen it in non-slay decks too, on using it to kill things like the 1/1 Spire from House Spider or Hapless Aristocrats. Because it is a 4-mana draw too, and we've talked about how good those are. So I like the card. 3 stars for me. Very powerful, but it can be a little clunky to play, and it only goes into certain deck archetypes, so there's that. The next card is Unto Dusk. 2 mana, burst speed spell, draw 1. Okay, 2 mana burst speed spells that draw 1 are also already slightly good. Nightfall. Activate an ally's Nightfall effect, ignoring any targeted portions. Okay, what right away can we think of that is good to use this on? Aphelios, Eclipse Dragon, Doom Beast, Lunari Priestess. There's a lot of good Nightfall that you would love to activate again. I like this card. The only issue with the card is it takes up slots in the deck, if that makes sense. Like, sure, it draws 1, so it replaces itself, so it's almost never a dead card. Because you can always just be like, oh, well, I don't have any Nightfall units, so I'll just play this as a 2 mana draw 1. Which is fine, but again, I feel like you might run into the issue of having too many good cards in your deck, and you're like, I need this card, I need X card, and I need to make like a cut, and I feel like Unto Dusk might be one of those cards you cut. So I don't know, in my opinion, how many cards you would want, but I feel like you would need a certain amount of Nightfall cards to actually get the Nightfall effect to go off, and you would want to get value that way. So things like I said, Lunari Priestess, Aphelios, Eclipse Dragon. And I don't think that deck exists right now. Still, though, very, very powerful effect, and for that reason, it's getting a whole 3 stars from me. Next up, we got the region that a lot of people think is the strongest region in the game. We have Targon. They got only 2 cards, no new champion. First card, Destiny's Call. Kind of meh. 8 mana, burst speed, grant an ally in hand, +8/+8. Yeah, this card is bad. Need to find some kind of way to combo this with something else. So the obvious thing is like put it on something elusive like Teemo, or I guess like Sparklefly, and then you have a really big elusive. Cool, but that's a really expensive 2-card combo. So yeah, compared to something like Battle Fury, I think being able to only hit things in hand is going to keep this from being ever playable. Unless there is, of course, like in the future, some kind of weird combo that you want to buff a card in hand. And there are some cards that you can buff in hand that summon copies of itself, which kind of seems cool. But for now, I just don't think this card is playable. But it's going to get a whole 1 star from me for future potential and combo potential. And the next card, Star Tip Peak. I like this card. 2 mana landmark, Countdown 2. Create 2 random celestial cards that cost 3 or less in hand. It's slow, and compared to invokes, you're losing out on the choices, and the choice, being able to choose what you're invoking with Celestials is a huge strength of invoking. Still though, this is a good card in my opinion for certain control decks like Zoe decks. It helps level up Zoe. Pretty much every single Celestial deck this can hit is a good card in numerous situations. Stun is pretty good against pretty much every deck, as is Silence. Moonsilver's good. The units are decent, so I like the card. I'm a big fan, but very few decks actually want this card. So 2 stars for me. Maybe if Target gets more landmark support, maybe this will get something, because they also have I think it's called Diversion Pass, the 3 mana draw a landmark or destroy a landmark card, and this might be a card to use with it. So who knows in the future. Anyway though, that's all for Target. Let's now head to the final region, the new region, Shurima. And we start with one of the best cards that Shurima has. We have Ancient Hourglass. Ancient Hourglass is kind of nuts. It is a 2 mana fast speed spell. Obliterate an ally and summon a stasis statue in its place. Stasis statue is a 2 mana landmark that says countdown 1. Summon an exact copy of the obliterated unit I replaced. You should be aware that that is, when it says exact, it really does mean exact. If the unit was stunned, it'll come back stunned. If it had barrier, it'll come back having barrier, etc., etc. Still, though, very good at protecting your units from things like removal, like Vengeance. So it lets you protect things like Fioras, Lee Sins, and other units that you just want to keep safe. Sure, it does remove the unit, so the unit can't block, so that's a little annoying, but it's still pretty nice. So for that whole reason, versatility and all that, 4 stars. It is a little bit meh in some matchups, and you might cut it down to only like 1 or 2, but it's still really good. And it is a little limited as for what decks it wants to go in. Still, I like it. Next card, Ancient Preparations. 1 mana, landmark, play, predict. Countdown tune, summon a Clockling. Clockling is a 1 mana 2/2. Predict, if you do not know what predict is a new keyword that says look at 3 cards from your deck. Choose 1, put it on top of the deck. You can also skip predict by pressing the button that normally passes priority to your opponent, as it will say skip. A lot of people don't know that. So you don't have to actually put one of the 3 cards from predict onto the top of your deck in case they're all bad and you don't want to draw one of them. This card is nice. Sure, it's a little bit meh because you, in the early game, you want to be fighting for board a little bit, but it does help smooth out your early draws. It's also a landmark, so it helps landmark synergy. So it has its uses. So for that reason, I'm going to give it 2 stars. Slow, and the Clockling's not that impressive, but predict is really strong. So 2 stars for me. Next card, Arise. Overcosted. That's the first thing I will say about this card is it is overcosted. The card itself is not bad, but again, just way too much mana. It is a 3 mana burst speed spell. Summon a Sand Soldier, create a fleeting Arise in hand. Sand Soldiers are 1 mana 1/1s with Ephemeral. Nexus Strike, deal 1 to the enemy. It is okay only as the champ spell of Azir, who we will talk about soon. As for putting it in your deck, you probably don't want to put it in your deck, even though burst speed summoning units is really good. For that reason, it is going to get 1 star from me because I can see it in maybe a 1-of for certain decks just to get burst speed attackers or blockers. So yeah, 1 star. Next up, Ascendant's Rise. I don't know about this card. Ascendant's Rise is a 7 mana slow spell. Level up all level 1 Ascended allies. It's slow. I know I can read cards too, Chad, but I really don't like slow spells that cost like 5 or more mana, and this costs 7 mana, so yeah, meh. Like, sure, if you have some Sun Discs out and you have a couple of champions out that are Ascended champions and you play this card, you might just win the game there if you can do this, but then that's asking a lot. And then you're Mono Shurima, and Mono Shurima is kind of a meme. So for that reason, I'm going to give it 1 star. It's powerful when it goes off, but again, it's a 7 mana slow spell that requires a lot of work. So 1 star from me. Next up, Aspiring Chronomancer. I really like this card. Really good body and predict. 2-mana, 2/3, play predict. Not much to talk about with this card, not much to unpack and analyze. Really good for control and combo decks. It lets you get on the board early and it lets you smooth out your draws. So yeah, not much to talk about here. 3 stars for me because it's not doing too much too flashy, but it plays a role and it plays that role really well. So 3 stars. Now then, first champion to talk about from Shurima, we have Azir. He's also ascended, so he has a level 3 form. Level 1 Azir is a 3-mana 1/5 that says, when allies attack, summon an attacking Sand Soldier. And again, we know what Sand Soldiers are, 1-mana 1/1s with Ephemeral. Nexus Strike, deal 1. To level him up, you have to summon 10 units. He doesn't have to see them summon, you just have to summon them. So there's a little synergy with his whole attacking and whole Sand Soldier thing. Leveled up Azir, level 2 Azir, is a 3-mana 2/6 that still does the whole Sand Soldier thing, but this time when you summon an ally, the summoned ally and Azir will get +1/+0. So you're starting to see the whole snowball thing that's going off. Level 3 Azir says when he levels up, replace your deck with the Emperor's deck, then draw 1. Emperor's deck is full of extremely mana efficient cards that should just win the game on their own. Now when allies attack, summon an attacking Sandstone Charger, which is a 5/2 with Ephemeral, really powerful, and his champion spell is Arise. Pretty good card overall. Probably the strongest of all the Shurima champions, in my opinion. Now you might say, why? Well, aggro. Aggro is really good. This lets you, compared to certain aggro decks, you don't actually have to develop the board, if that makes sense, compared to, like, let's say discard aggro, who's kind of weak against things like Avalanche or Withering Wail. The Sand Soldiers aren't really gonna get hit by the Avalanche. Sure, they can still get pinged down with Withering Wail, but he is just a great engine for putting pressure on your opponents and stuff. And there's also some potential in a control deck as a one of for the whole Emperor's deck thing, but that's not really a thing at the moment. It's mostly just a meme and not viable. Still, though, very strong card. Honestly, 5 stars from me. I really think Azir is great. I'm not an aggro player, but I think he's a very powerful card, and he is kind of the glue that holds Shurima aggro together. Next up, Bakai Reaper. This is kind of like Bark Beast, but for Shurima. 1-mana 1/2 Fearsome. When you slay a unit, grant me +1/+0. It's a permanent buff too, so this guy will keep getting bigger and bigger. Thanks to Fearsome, he's gonna be a little bit tough to deal with. Think like turn 1 Bakai Reaper, turn 2 Curse Keeper plus Butcher. That's a lot of stuff on the field already. It's the classic, like, you can do that also with Bark Beast, but Bakai Reaper keeps growing and growing, unlike the Bark Beast, who's stuck at 3/3. Sure, I guess like Bark Beast dodges Avalanche and Mystic Shot, but whatever. Bark Beast is also in Shadow Isles, and this is Shurima only, so you wouldn't even have to play Shadow Isles if you want to just play this. But you would probably play this with Shadow Isles. So yeah, really strong aggro 1-drop. Pretty decent, but only an aggro card. But it does its job, and it does it well as a strong 1-drop for an aggro deck, so 3 stars from me. Next up, we have Bakai Sand Spinner. I like this card. I think this card's a little underrated. The issue with this card is it is more of a utility card, and there's only so many slots in a deck that you can put utility cards in. But Bakai Sand Spinner is a 4-mana 5/3. Play, grant an ally -1/-0, invulnerable. That's really nice that it's just a playability. You don't have to do anything fancy like Daybreak or Nightfall. You can just play this whenever. And giving vulnerable to a unit is always decent, especially if you can choose what you're giving vulnerable to. And being able to shrink it is also really nice, even though it's a very small shrinking. It's still shrinking a unit, so you might be able to trade something in and have it survive. The issue with Bakai Sandspinner is, again, it's a utility card that doesn't really win the game on its own. It's kind of like a pseudo removal card. Sure, there's some synergy with the stuff that says, like, when I've challenged something, do something. So there's that. Again, the stat line is not that great. 4-mana 5/3 is not terrible, but not amazing. A lot of cards that are 4-mana 5/3s that are playable usually have ways to protect themselves or in regions that protect them really well. Think like Ash and Freljord. Still though, I like the card and I think it's a little underrated, so I'm going to give it 2 stars. Again, only a utility card, but it's very decent in the decks that can play it. The other issue I think with the card is there are other ways to give vulnerable to units in Shurima that are also just as decent, if not better. Next up, Bloodthirsty Marauder. Uh, the meme is it's Region Learguard, but better. The problem is it's also in Shurima, who has other 1-drops that are good aggro 1-drops. He has a 1-mana 3/1. There's not much to talk about with him. 1-mana 3/1, and that's it. Great stats for a 1-drop, especially for an aggro 1-drop, but again, we have Bakai Reaper, who's kind of better. And aggro Shurima, I feel like would rather play Bakai Reaper than Bloodthirsty Marauder. Maybe in the future, if there is a Shurima aggro deck that doesn't care about slaying too much, that wants to play Bloodthirsty Marauder, sure, but I don't like the card too much. But it's still decent. So for me, I'm going to give it 2 stars. It's a solid 1-drop for an aggro deck, and that's it. Next card, Boomerang Blade. 7-mana slow spell. An ally strikes the strongest and weakest enemies. It's a 7-mana slow spell. It's powerful. Don't get me wrong. It's a powerful effect, but 2 issues. 1, it's expensive. And 2, it can be disrupted fairly easily by just removing your opponent, killing whatever it is, what you are trying to use to remove their units. So you want to use this on something that has Spell Shield, which there are some things in Shurima that have Spell Shield. But again, it's a 7-mana slow spell. So very clunky, very expensive. 1 star though, because if you're playing mono Shurima and you just want a really big removal spell, I guess there's this, but the problem with that is you kind of need a big unit as well if you're trying to remove big things. So again, it's a little mediocre. Now we have Buried Sundisk. 1 mana, landmark, start of the game. Draw 1 of me if all your cards are Shuriman. Countdown 25. Restore the Sundisk. When an ascended ally levels up, advance me 10 rounds. When you have restored the Sundisk, you immediately draw 1 of all your ascendants. And for the rest of the game, your level 2 ascendants are level 3. That is a bunch of stuff to unpack. The thing is, it's good if you can do it. The problem is actually doing everything that it's asking for you to do. And the other issue is that mono Shurima at the moment, in my opinion, is not viable and just doesn't have a large enough card pool to be viable. And the other issue is landmark removal. Removing Buried Sundisk really harms your deck. It's not impossible to win with a mono Shurima deck if they kill your Sundisk. It just gets a lot harder. And it's not uncommon if they remove your Sundisk, thanks to cards like Scorched Earth. I believe it's called Baleful Strider, the 8-mana 8/8 in Freljord that either deals 2 to everything, well, every unit, or removes all landmarks. That's also somewhat being played thanks to Lysandra. I've even seen some Crumbles get played in Captain Arikas. They're not too common, but yeah, if your opponent is able to remove your Sundisk, you're a sad boy. Still though, I think as Shurima gets better, the region gets stronger and stronger, this deck gets better and better, because as we've seen from Azir and we'll see from the other Ascended champions, they are really powerful in game winning if you can activate the Sundisk. Again, the biggest weakness is landmark removal. So for that reason, 2 stars from me. Next up though. Oh, this card's bad. I'm sorry. Callous Bone Crusher. 4 mana, 6/3, reputation I cost 2. Yeah. Nothing, not even a good keyword like overwhelm or fearsome. Reputation takes a long time to get going. And in the late game, you can do better than just playing a 2 mana 6/3, I think. So for that reason, 0 stars for me. No deck really wants this, in my opinion. Mid-range doesn't care about this. Aggro, it's too slow. Why would a control deck just play a unit that doesn't really have like a defensive keyword or draws cards? I don't know. So 0 stars from me. Next up though. Ooh, I like this card. Desert Naturalist. 4 mana 2/4. Play, destroy a landmark. If it's allied, summon a Grumpy Rock Bear. Grumpy Rock Bear is a 5 mana 5/4. Hey, why don't I destroy my ancient preparations to summon a 5/4 instead of a 2/2? That's pretty cool. I think this card is the second best landmark removal in the game after Scorched Earth. And that's kind of good because Scorched Earth is a really good card. You can use this with a lot of smaller countdown landmarks to just destroy them, to just get a 5/4 if they have a playability, and that's all you care about is the playability, like Ancient Preparations, to just develop the board really well. So the only issue I see with this card is you kind of need to play it alongside landmarks in case your opponent's not playing landmarks. But if your opponent's playing landmarks and you're able to kill like a Sun Disk or a Veiled Temple or, I don't know, a Star Springs, this card could just win you a game on its own. Understand it for this cost, of course, don't get me wrong. 4-mana, 2/4, that's what you're expecting from a 3-drop. So again, like I said, you need to activate its playability and get value out of it. So for that reason, 3 stars though. It's good tech, and it's good in the right deck, but again, there are some times where it will just whiff. Next up, Desert's Wrath. 4-mana slow spell, grant allied sand soldiers everywhere, +1/+0. Summon 2 sand soldiers. I don't know about this card. It feels like a card that wants to be in an aggressive sand soldier deck, but it's a 4-mana slow spell, and I feel like by the time you play this, you don't want to play this early. In other words, this is the thing you want to play in the late game, which is when you want to try to finish your opponent off. So you'd rather play something big like, I always go to this, but Cithria. So I think it's okay as a 1 or 2 of in aggressive sand soldier decks, just to buff the sand soldiers. And sure, it does give you some sand soldiers to activate, I guess, ephemeral synergy as well, and to give you units to attack inward for free to activate Azir. So that's kind of nice. But because of that, only 2 stars for me. Only really goes in one deck, the Sand Soldier deck, and only aggressive decks too at that. So yeah, 2 stars. It's not like there's a control-y Sand Soldiers deck anyway, but still, 2 stars for me. Oh, now this card. Destined Poro. 1-mana, 1/1. Round start. If you've leveled a champion, transform me into Exalted Poro. Exalted Poro on the left, as you can see, is a 1-mana 2/2 that says, I have 3 random keywords. The card looks good. The problem is, it's a 1-mana 1/1, so you can kill it. And 2, it's asking a lot. You have to level up a champion before it transforms. And 3, even if you have leveled a champion, it's round start. So your opponent has the whole turn until it transforms to deal with the Destined Poro, if they even want to, because by the time a Destined Poro is turning into an Exalted Poro, it's probably maybe around like turn 6-ish, I'd say. And a 1-man 2/2, even with 3 random keywords, it's not doing too much. Like, sure, if you hit Elusive, I guess, like Elusive Scout is kind of annoying, but not that amazing. So yeah, this card maybe is good if Shurima Poros can be a thing, like Shurima Freljord Poros, but that sounds kind of weird. And really, like, I just don't know. Like, I think you have to play like Poro Snacks to buff the Poro, and then have the Exalted Poro get good RNG to get good keywords. So there's a lot that needs to be done here. Still though, in a vacuum, it looks decent. So I give it a whole 1 star. A lot better than the other 1/1 Poros for 1. Next up, Devoted Council. 3-mana 1/6. Round start. If you've leveled a champion, heal your champions and Nexus for 2. Only really good against aggro. That's it. And the other issue is I feel like this is only for Mono Shurima, because if you need healing, I feel like your secondary region has healing, or usually will have better healing than this. Think like Demacia has Radiant Guardians. Targon has a billion things. Shadow Isles, I guess, has Withering Whales. I don't know. Freljord also has like Kindly Tavern Keepers. I guess like Noxus and PNZ don't really have healing, so maybe in those regions, but that's not really a combo. So again, like I said, only really good against aggro, and only really decent in Mono Shurima, which is kind of a meme right now. So for that reason, 2 stars for me. I think it is fine in the certain deck, but not amazing, and only in certain metas it's decent. 2 stars. Next up, one of the best, most played units in the game right now, Dunekeeper. 1-mana 2/1. When I'm summoned, summon a Sand Soldier. We know what they do already, so I won't reiterate it. Why is this guy good? Well, he is a 1-mana 2/1, and someone's a 1/1. I don't know why. I don't know why I need to talk more about that. That is really good. Compare this to Bloodthirsty Marauder, the 1-mana 3/1. That's just a 1-mana 3/1. Why would you play a 1-mana 3/1 when you could play a 1-mana 2/1 that can hit in for 4 on turn 1 compared to this? And compared to a 1-mana 3/1, this is a little bit better as both a defensive play and in the late game, because in the late game, it's still creating 2 bodies, and on defense, it creates a 1/1 ephemeral to chump block with. And for that reason, it doesn't even have to be an aggro-only card. It can be in mid-range. It can be in even control if your control deck just needs something to get on the board early. Big fan of this card. For that reason, I'm actually going to give it 4 stars, because while I was saying it's okay in the late game, it is a little mediocre in the late game, though. Like, in the late game, a lot of the time, I feel like if you're not aggro, you're going to just save this card to play to try and use the Sand Soldier to chump with, so that's what's holding it back from being 5 whole stars. Next up, Emperor's Deus. 2-mana landmark. When allies attack, summon an attacking Sand Soldier. It's a very annoying card. Only really for Azir decks and aggro decks, but if you can get multiple attacks off, whether that's through scouts or rallies, this thing can get a lot of pressure really quickly on the field. So very, very strong, but only really goes in one deck. It's not the scariest card by itself. It's more of just a cog in the deck doing its job and not being that scary, but it's annoying, and that's what aggro likes to do, is being annoying and push damage through. So 2 stars from me. It has a deck. It does well in that deck, but it only goes into that one deck. So yeah, 2 stars. Next up. Oh, this card is bad. Emperor's Divide. Give enemies vulnerable this round and summon 6 Sand Soldiers. I said, like, maybe there's a control Sand Soldiers deck out there, and this would be in it. The problem is this card is bad. Giving enemies vulnerable for the round only, and then summoning Sand Soldiers is not good. This is, even with a little bit of buffing going on, those Sand Soldiers are probably not killing units, and if your opponent has nothing on the field, that's not even that much damage, in all honesty. Like, sure, 6 Sand Soldiers, that's what? 12 damage, but that'll never happen. So yeah. For that reason, 0 stars. I don't think any deck wants this. Again, like I said, maybe in the future, if there's some kind of like weird control-y style of Sand Soldier deck, but right now Sand Soldiers are more aggressive, and that deck doesn't want to play this. And Control Shurima has better control tools than this, so bad card. Next up, though, Esteemed Hierophant. It's Badger Bear. 3 mana, 3/4. When I'm summoned, advance your Sun Disc by 2 rounds. Only playable in Sun Disc decks, because Badger Bear is not a playable card anymore, sadly, as much as I love him. So yeah, not much to talk about him, or with this card. Even in Sun Disc decks, he's not amazing, but you still play him in Sun Disc decks because it helps you flip your Sun Disc, so you kind of have to play him in that deck. 2 stars. Good in the deck he's good in. Well, decent in the deck he's good in, but that's it, and that's literally only one deck he can be played in. So yeah, 2 stars. Oh, now this card. I like this card. Exhaust. 1 mana, focus speed spell. I think this is the first focus speed card I have rated today. Focus speed, if you don't know what focus speed is basically gem speed. It's a burst speed spell, in other words, that cannot be played during combat or in response to a spell. So you can play it outside of combat to really not pass priority, is the best way to think of it. Give an enemy -2, -0, and vulnerable this round. This is great. Yeah, this is kind of like Shurima's removal. You will use this to remove problematic units, champions, while keeping your units alive. Also triggers challenging synergy as well, so that's really nice. Just a really nice card overall. 3 stars for me only, though, because there is some times where you want to cut it for other things, and not being burst speed does hold it back, so you can't use it as a combat trick. In other words, it kind of sucks on defense. It's mostly for just offensive purposes, so that's why it's only getting 3 stars for me. Next up, Golden Ambassador. 4 mana, 3/2. Allegiance. Draw champion and grant it +2/+2. It's written in stars on a stick, except instead of giving a discount, you get a 3/2 body. It's also the allegiance card for Shurima, like I said already. It's a really nice card. Again, only mono Shurima will play this, but maybe a mono Shurima deck that doesn't want to play Sundisk can play this as well, because it wants to splash for some big fancy spell from another region, like, I don't know, Atrocity or something. Pretty nice card. Cards that replace themselves are always good, especially when they draw specific cards like champions. 4 stars from me. Only really goes into Mono Shurima though, so that's why it's not 5 stars. And its stat line is a little mediocre for a 4-drop. Still, really, really great. Next up, Hibernating Rock Bear. This card, I don't know about this card. 2-mana landmark. Countdown 3, summon a Grumpy Rock Bear. 5-mana 5/4 is what the Rock Bears are. It's really slow. Even if you summon this on turn 3, it's still going to take time and come out on what, turn 5, I believe? And then it's like, sure, you got a 5/4 on 5. And like, yes, you can, there are ways to copy it with Talia, as we'll see in the future, but there are just better landmarks if you want to play early landmarks, I think. So this is, I feel like, more of an expedition card than a constructed playable card. So for that reason, it gets 1 star. It's fine if you really need more cheap landmarks, but I think there's just better. Ooh, speaking of more landmarks, Inner Sanctum, 3-mana landmark, Reputation, I cost 0, Countdown 1, create 2 Lucky Finds in hand. Lucky Finds are fleeting focus speed spells that say pick a buff from among 3 to grant an ally. I am not going to list all the buffs on screen because there's a lot of them. Most of the buffs are just keywords, things like challengers, overwhelm, spell shields, or stat buffs like +1/+1, +0/+2, +2/+0, etc., etc. I like this card. I really, really like this card. It's only good for a couple of decks, though. Decks that really want to basically Voltron up a unit and make a buff up a big unit. Think like Lee Sin and Fiora. Pretty much only those kind of decks at the moment. Who knows what we'll get in the future, though. But that's it for those, or that's it for this card. Only those decks want to play that, or this kind of card. So for that reason, 2 stars from me. I like the card, though, and I like the Lee Sin decks and the Fiora decks that play this card. But outside of those decks, I don't think any other deck wants this. Next up, Inspiring Marshal, 5-mana 4/6. When you summon another ally, give it +2/+0 this round. Pretty decent pseudo anthem effect, especially for Azir decks as a 2 of. The problem is it is a little expensive. But the nice thing is it doesn't have to do anything else besides just existing on the board. So that's really nice, again, with things like Sand Soldiers. Kind of fights Cythria for the late game-ish spot for aggro, but you could just play this along with Cythria, and then you go like turn 5 Inspiring Marshal, turn 6 Cythria, crash in with Cythria, do a lot of damage, win game. But that's really the only kind of deck it goes in, so for that reason, lack of versatility gives it 2 stars, even though it's somewhat decent in those decks. Next up. Oh, no, this card? I don't think this card's good. Kahiri the Returned. When I'm summoned, create a copy of me in your deck. When you see me in a prediction, grant all allied copies of me everywhere +2/+2. Did I say it's a 6-mana 4/4 with Fearsome? Well, I just did. Yeah, it's a 6-mana 4/4 with Fearsome. That's a really expensive mana cost. Can't even really play 2 of these guys in the same round. Now, if you can somehow discount this guy, maybe, but again, like, it's slow, it's clunky, and then you have to see it in a prediction. I just don't know about this card. I don't think it's good for constructed. It's a fun meme, and I think that's it. Just too expensive, even if you keep buffing it over and over and over. So for that reason, a whole 0 stars from me. Now though, Kahiri the Student, basically Kahiri before he returned. Kahiri the Student is a 3-mana 3/3 that when he's summoned, grant me +1/+1 if you predicted this game. So then he becomes a 3-mana 4/4. Kind of vanilla. Just like no like cool keyword, no like challenger or tough or elusive or whatever. But Badger Bear before the nerf was playable. If you don't know what the nerf was, Badger Bear used to be a 3-mana 4/4. So if you play like Aspiring Chronomancer into Kahiri the Student, that's a cool looking combo. Again, the issue is I don't think that's doing enough. And again, Kahiri the Student is just, I don't know, it's just, I feel like there's just better stuff you can do on turn 3, in other words. Whether that is summoning a champion like a Zir, banking the spell mana for, spells. I just think there's better stuff. Killing a unit, whatever. Still though, a 3-mana 4/4 is slightly playable, so maybe in the right mid-range Shurima deck you will play this. So for that reason, 2 stars. Just because 3-mana 4/4 is an overstated card. Next up, we have Nasus, our next champion from Shurima. Also, basically, they who endure. Nasus is a 6-mana 2/2 fearsome. He has +1/+1 for each unit you've slain this game. Level up, he has to strike for 10+ damage. Leveled up Nasus gets Spell Shield as well. And then the enemies have -1/-0. And his level 3 form, because he's an Ascended, still has the whole Spell Shield and fearsome stuff. But now enemies get -3/-0, and he starts at 10/10 instead of 2/2 or 3/3. So that's big. As for his champion spell, it is Siphoning Strike. It is a 5-mana slow spell that says an ally strikes a unit. If it dies, grant allied champions everywhere +2/+2. Good synergy with Nasus, but kind of a mediocre concerted strike. Still though, Nasus is pretty good. Put him in a Slay deck with Kindred, and you've got a great deck. Sure, a little weak to Hush, but just don't play against Hush, Forehead. And plus, if you can level him up somehow before they can Hush him, that's great, because then he'll have Spell Shield. So yeah, really strong champ. Kind of plain, kind of basic. I don't know the best way to describe it. Doesn't really, nothing too fancy is being done. He's just a big ball of stats, but that's kind of decent. And his champ spell, while not amazing, is not terrible. So good card. 4 stars from me. I like the guy. I think he's decent. Next up, we got Payday. 2-mana focus spell, create a lucky find in hand. We already know what lucky finds are. Not amazing. Again, really only similar to the landmark, only really for Fiora and Lee Sin decks. Pretty nice for Lee Sin. It helps level him up really quickly. Also, it's a spell that creates a spell, so gets barrier on Lee Sin, so that's pretty cool. Again, lack of versatility, but it has a couple of decks that like it, so 2 stars. Next up, I love this card. This is one of my favorite cards in the entire expansion. In fact, not just the region. Kind of a plain card. 2-mana, landmark, Preservarium. When I'm summoned, draw 1, countdown 2, draw 1. A pretty good card draw card. For very, controlling decks, it's really nice. Even for some mid-range decks, it's nice too, because it immediately cycles itself, so that's great. Pair it with Desert Naturalist to basically trade off that second card you're going to get for a 5/4 is also pretty cool. All around, great card. 2-mana draw 2. Sure, it takes a while to get that second card, but it's pretty decent in my opinion. And again, for the landmark synergy decks, it's a cheap landmark, so that's nice too. So 4 stars from me. The only reason it's not getting that 5th star is it is a little slow to get that second card, and sometimes in the late game, a 2-mana draw 2 is just not enough, especially if you're passing priority. Next up, Promising Future. Now, this is a meme, but this is a meme that has potential, I think. 4-mana slow spell, grant an allied landmark, my countdown completion effect activates twice. The only issue I see with this card is, 1, I don't think there's a landmark that really wants this thing at the moment. Like every landmark that has a countdown would love to have their countdown activate twice, but I don't think there's a landmark that would give enough value to justify playing a bad card like Promising Future. Also, another thing is if you play this card, then your opponent, especially if they have landmark removal, will try their best to destroy this because that is insane value. They prevent the countdown from going off. They pseudo counter promising future, and they destroy the landmark as well, of course. So yeah, I think it's, well, no pun intended. I do think it's a promising card for the future when we get more cards. So for that reason, 1 star purely because of the potential that it has. But right now, I don't think it's playable. Next up, Quicksand. It is a 3-mana burst spell that says give an enemy -4/-0 and disable its keywords, excluding any negative keywords. So think ephemeral. Only for the round too, by the way. It is Hush, but worse. In very, very niche scenarios, it is better than Hush, but I'd say 9 out of 10 times Hush is much better than this card. So if you're in Targon and Shurima and you want to play Quicksand, just play Hush, in my opinion. Still though, Hush is such a good card that I would say bad Hush is still really, really good. So yeah, play it as a 2-of in more control-y Shurima decks. Maybe even a 3-of, depending on the meta. Helps you get rid of problematic elusives, helps you deal with things with tough. Again, like I said, the biggest issue is the lack of a silence, so it doesn't get rid of big buffs like health buffs or really, really big attack buffs like a big Vi or something. But removing things like quick attack and elusive is really powerful. So for me, 3 stars. Next up though, this card. I'll be the first one to tell you. I am probably overrating this card. I really think this card is great. Rampaging Bakai. He is a 5-mana 4/6 with Overwhelm. Pretty decent stats for the cost and a pretty good keyword. Playability. If you've slain 4+ units this game, an enemy and I strike each other. So he's a 5-mana 4/6 with Overwhelm that has single combat attached to it. Kind of. The only issue with the card, and the whole reason why I think I might be overrating this card, is you have to slay 4 units this game before you play him. That's a little bit tough to do if you want to play this guy on curve on turn 5. Still though, even if you're not playing this guy on curve on turn 5, he is still a 5-mana 4/6 with single combat attached to him. That gets rid of a lot of problematic cards. That gets rid of Zoe's, Aphelios, Twisted Fate, I don't know, Wiggly Burblefish, elusives in general, except for, I guess, like Fizz, maybe. So yeah, I really like the card. The biggest hurdle to overcome with this guy is just activating Slay 4 times. But if you are able to activate Slay 4 times, this card is great, especially, and then you can even go for a little bit more value and just like try and bounce him back to the hand, maybe with something like Monastery of Harana. Now we're getting a little too memey, but still. Or just make clones of him. So pretty fun card. 5 whole stars from me. Again, I might be overrating him and he deserves maybe only 3 or 4 stars, but I think he's powerful enough. He deserves the 5 stars, and I think he will get better as Shurima gets better. Next up, Raz Bloodmane. 7-mana 6/6 fearsome attack. Give enemies -2/-0 this round. I think this card is bad, but I do think it has a home. That home is fearsome aggro as a finisher. You might say, doesn't fearsome aggro have better finishers like Atrocity? Maybe, but I think like maybe with Harrowing, this is a pretty decent card to get with Harrowing because it has fearsome itself, and if you get more than one of this off of Harrowing, that's pretty cool. But again, that's the only deck I can really see Raz being played in, is a fearsome deck with or without Harrowing, I don't know, but again, it's a 7-mana 6/6, so very expensive even for aggro decks. So for that reason, 2 stars, mostly because of potential, and there is a deck that kind of likes this effect, so 2 stars from me. Next one is the next Ascended champion, the 3rd Ascended one. It's the Crocodile Boy. It is Renekton. Renekton, I have this backwards, by the way, is a 4-mana 4/4 champion with Overwhelm. He says, when I challenge an enemy, give me +2/+1 this round. Level up, I've dealt 12 damage. I apologize again for having the level 1 on the right and leveled up form on the left. I normally have that in the other order. But leveled up Renekton, level 2 Renekton, is a 4-mana 5/5 that has Overwhelm still. And now when he attacks, he gets +3/+3 this round. Doesn't have to challenge anymore. And level 3 Renekton, after you've restored the Sun Discs, is a 4-mana 10/10 with Overwhelm. And whenever he attacks or blocks, deals 2 to enemies and the enemy nexus, kind of like a souped up, leveled up Gangplank. His champion spell is Ruthless Predator, 2-mana burst spell. Give an ally +2/+0, and an enemy vulnerable this round. Pretty nice for just killing important stuff. Is fairly cheap as well. Helps activate his +2/+1. Helps him deal a lot of damage really quickly. So really, really nice card. As for Renekton himself, he is a little bit vanilla, if that makes sense. Like, he's not really doing much. He's mostly just here as a big boy with Overwhelm. So, in my opinion, he might be replaceable in the future as more and more cards come out. And he only really goes into Overwhelm decks. So, for all of those reasons, I'm only going to give him 3 stars. I still think he's good in the right deck, like an Overwhelm Shurima deck. But outside of those decks, I don't really think he has a home, in my opinion. So 3 stars for lack of versatility. Next up, we got Ricochet. This card is bad. 6 mana slow spell. Reputation, I cost 3. Deal 1 to a random enemy or the enemy nexus 5 times. It's Make It Rain, but slow and bad and expensive. Yeah, I don't think it's good. The only way I can see you ever playing a spell like this is if you can, 1, activate its reputation so it's cheap, and buff its damage with either something like Powder Kegs or something, or I guess like Funsmith to make it deal a little more damage so you can actually kill stuff. But that's a lot of work for not a big payoff. So for that reason, 1 star. It has some potential with like spell boosts and whatever, but I don't think it's playable right now, so 1 star. Next up, we're heading into the rights now. We got Rite of Calling. 0 mana slow spell. Kill an ally or destroy one of your mana gems to draw a champion. I mean, like, I don't really think I have to talk too much about this. It's a slow speed entreat where you get to destroy a mana gem or kill an ally, but it costs 0 mana. That's pretty good. The only downside I'd say is, like, unlike Entreat, you can't play this to draw a champion when you already have a champion on the field to get the champion spell. Think like if you have an Anivia or a Fiora on the field, you will use Entreat to draw a second copy and play like, I don't know, Harsh Winds or Riposte. You can't do that during combat. You have to do this at slow speed. So that's a little bit of a downside, but the trade-off is this is a 0 mana card, which is pretty good for the decks that want to draw their champions a lot of the time, like Nasus, Fiora's, Lee Sin. So for that reason, 3 stars. The next right is Rite of Dominance. 4 mana fast spell. Kill an ally, destroy one of your mana gems to give all enemies -2/-0 this round. The only reason I think this card is even somewhat playable is because of the fast speed. If it weren't fast speed, this card would be bad, but you can use it as kind of a bad combat trick, and there is some synergy for destroying your mana gems. So I do think there's a little bit of potential here, and it is a decent combat trick too if you're trying to be more aggressive, I guess, so your guys don't die. So for that reason, 2 stars. There's some potential here, and it has a couple of decks that like this effect. Next up, the best right and one of the best Shurima cards, Rite of Negation. 4 mana fast spell. Kill an ally or destroy one of your mana gems to stop all enemy fast, slow spells, or end slow spells, I guess, and skills. It's just deny. It's deny, but slightly better. But it's not a strict upgrade to deny, thanks to the whole having to kill an ally or destroy one of your mana gems. But since it kills everything, negates or counters or whatever you want to call it, it stops all of your opponent's stuff that's on the stack. There are some situations where it's just better if you can bait your opponent into playing like 2 or 3 spells, and then you play Rite of Negation, and then you win the game. Also, it's really nice against Karma, so that's the thing. But compared to Deny, I'd say most of the time this is really just going to be Deny. And you're usually gonna be destroying a gem to play around your opponent, killing the ally that's trying to be sacrificed to it. But the problem is, I feel like you don't mind destroying a gem because Deny and Random Negation is a card that's really good in the late game, and in the late game, you don't mind destroying one mana gem too much. So, really, really great card. Honestly, I could see this card getting nerfed in the future. 5 stars for me. Like, I think it's just on average worse Deny, but that whole being able to stop all fast spells, slow spells, and skills, stop everything on the stack is really really good. It has some high potential for blowouts. Plus, it's outside of Ionia, so you don't have to play Ionia for Deny anymore, which is a really big thing because Ionia kind of sucks right now. Next up, also gives you Deny for non-Ionia regions, like I said, so you can now go to, like, I don't know, Shurima for Fiora if you still want Deny. I think I just said that twice already, but whatever. Let's get out of here. Let's go to the next card. It's Rockhopper. He is a 2-mana 3/1 that says when I'm summoned, summon a Roiling Sands. Roiling Sands is a 2-mana landmark that says when an enemy is summoned, destroy me to grant it vulnerable. Only really good in the Landmark Matters decks, in my opinion. But it's not terrible in that deck. It does make it annoying for your opponents if you know your opponent's deck really well, so you can play this on key rounds when they want to summon a specific unit. Like, you play this card on turn 5 to make Kindred turns a little awkward, or on 6 to make Nasus turns a little awkward if they want to play Nasus. Or you just play this early on turn 2 just to get some board presence. Really nice card, but again, I think you have to make use of summoning landmarks and care about summoning landmarks to actually want to play this card. So for that reason, 2 stars. Next up. Oh, Ruin Runner. Probably one of the best cards in the set. I think I just said that about Random Negation, but this is also in contention for one of the best cards of the set. Ruin Runner, very vanilla basic card. 5 mana 6/4, Overwhelm, Spell Shield. It's not complex. Nothing crazy going on here. It's just a good, well-statted unit with a very nice keyword in the form of Overwhelm. And Spell Shield makes it hard to remove. So, yeah, there's not much to talk about here. 5 stars for me. Like, crazy good. I honestly could see this card getting nerfed too and becoming like either 6 mana or a 5 mana 5/4 or a 5 mana 6/3. It's insane how good this card is, and especially in the right deck. Next card, Ruinous Path. 2 mana slow speed spell. Draw 1. If you've slain a unit this round, drain 2 from the enemy nexus. I like it. Aggro decks like it to just get a little extra burn damage. Control decks kind of like it if they can use it to try and drain as well as cycle through the deck to try and survive a little longer. Very cute with Karma, but then you're playing Karma. So, fun card. Could be a little bit clunky though, so 3 stars for me. 2 mana draw 1's just nice, even if it's slow speed. So, I like it. Next up, Ruthless Predator. It's Renekton's champ spell. We talked about this a little bit. 2 mana burst speed spell, give an ally +2/+0 and an enemy vulnerable this round. Very nice card because it just helps you kill problematic stuff. Getting attack is not as great as getting health, but it does help with things like Renekton, and it lets you trade up similar to Riposte. So that's nice. So for that whole reason, I am going to give it 2 stars because while giving vulnerable is nice, and getting +2/+0 for the attack is nice, I feel like exhaust is just better if you want to give something vulnerable. So you really need to make use of that +2/+0. And I guess it is burst speed, so you can use it in combat, but meh. Still though, very good card. Next up though, Size Scout. 3 mana 2/4, play, predict. If you pick a landmark though, grant me elusive. It's a good card in a vacuum. The problem is a landmark deck, I don't really think cares about getting a 3-mana 2/4. Sure, that's a really good stat line for an elusive, but I don't think a landmark matters deck is going to care about a 3-mana 2/4 too much. They're not going to be really aggressive when or with an elusive card, so I really only think you'll play this card if elusives are extremely popular, or maybe in singleton, I guess. But again, we don't like to talk too much about that because this is mostly for constructed. Really though, predict is good though. So if you want to get predict out and you want some way to stop elusives or slow them down, this is a decent choice. So I'm gonna give it 2 stars. Also, good filler for Mono Shurima as well. Just for the 3-drop slot if you're not playing like a 0 or something, I guess. Next card, Saltspire. I think this card is bad. 4-mana landmark. Countdown 2. Summon a Grumpy Rock Bear. Then if you summon 4+ landmarks this game, grant the strongest ally +2/+2. I have no idea what deck wants this. I guess like you could say, oh, this is perfect for the Promising Future card. Use Promising Future on this, get 2 Rock Bears, and then give the strongest ally +4/+4. That's really slow. And then you're playing 2 bad cards to get an okay effect. And plus, you can't even control what the or you can kind of, but it's hard to control exactly what's getting the buff. You normally like to have the smaller things get the buff so they can dodge removal. Putting more stats on something that's already really strong is not amazing unless it has like overwhelm or I guess lifesteal. And in this case, I feel like a lot of times if you play this card, the Rock Bear itself is going to get the buff because the Rock Bear is what, a 5-mana 5/4. That's already pretty big compared to a lot of other stuff you're going to get. And again, it's slow. It's even if you play this on turn 4, it'll come down on turn 6. So it takes time. So for all those reasons, I don't think this card is actually playable at all. 0 stars from me. Next up though, Sanctum Conservator. Very niche finisher for a control deck. 8-mana 8/5 fearsome. Play it if you've slain 13 units this game. Kill all enemy followers and summon a copy of me. Only hits followers, doesn't hit champions, so your opponents will still have their champions on the field. Some people are like, oh, what about the Ruination synergy? I'm like, that's a 17-mana 2-card combo that's spread out over 2 turns at least. I don't know if that's exactly something I'm into, but I think this does have potential in a Slay deck with Kindred as like a 1 to 2 of for the late game to just wipe your opponent's board. Again, the issue is you're not really getting rid of their champions, so that's a big negative in all honesty. But still, I think there is some potential in that like more control-y deck, so I'm gonna give it 1 star, even though I don't think it's a good card. Next up, Sandcrafter, 4-mana 3/5. Attack. Summon an attacking Sand Soldier. Okay body and an okay effect. The problem is the 4-mana slot is kind of like contended, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there's better things you can just do than just summon a 4-mana 3/5 that's attacking or creating a Sand Soldier when you attack, right? Still, though, a decent card. Not bad as filler for a deck if you're just looking for filler for your Sand Soldier decks, but I think there's just better things you can do than this card. Still, 2 stars for me. Not terrible, not amazing, but not bad. Next card. Oh, speaking of bad, this card's terrible. Sandstone Chimera, 12 mana 6/6. Reduce my cost by 1 for each ally, or each time an ally attacked this game. Some people think this card's good because of Wiggly Burblefish, or because of they've seen Wiggly Burblefish be good, and they're like, this thing's like Wiggly Burblefish. No, it's not. First off, Wiggly Burblefish starts at 6. This starts at 12. Sure, it's quicker, or yeah, it gets discounted much faster. But it still takes time, and Wiggly Burblefish has a very relevant keyword in the form of elusive. This guy doesn't have a keyword at all. No fearsome, no overwhelm, no tough, lifesteal, challenger, whatever. This guy will just get chump blocked forever. So for that reason, 0 stars. I don't think any deck wants this. You might say like, oh, what about the Shurima Azir Sand Soldier deck? I don't think they want this. I feel like that kind of deck would just rather kill the opponent by the time they're trying to summon this by playing things like Cythria and maybe multiple rallies. So yeah, not a fan of it. 0 stars. Next up, Sandswept Tome. I said Tome. I meant Tomb. Sandswept Tomb. 5 mana landmark. When allies attack, summon an attacking Sandstone Charger. It's like Emperor's Deus, except it's way more expensive. Sure, a Sandstone Charger is much, much bigger than the Sand Soldier, but it's a 5 mana landmark. Sure, if you have something on the board and then you play the tomb and then you attack, you can get a charger right away. But how many attacks do you have to get off until you are happy that you've played Sandswept Tomb? I'd say minimum, I'd want to attack 3 times and get 3 Sandstone Chargers. So that means if you play this on 5 and you have the attack token on 5, disregarding any like extra attacks like scouts or rallies, that means you're not getting that third Sandstone Charger attack until turn 9? That's really slow for a deck that wants to play Sandstone Charger. That's way too slow in my opinion. I feel like you're better off just playing units. So meh, kind of bad in my opinion. 1 star though, because maybe in a more mid-rangey deck that can have multiple attacks, sure, because like the Sand Soldier deck is more aggro, so maybe this is more of a mid-rangey card. But again, it's a 5 mana landmark. That's so expensive, and it doesn't really help develop the board at all. And plus, these Sandstone Chargers don't really do anything. They're just big, but they can get chumped. So that's kind of a problem. Next up, Shape Stone. I like this card. 1 mana, burst speed spell. Give an ally +1/+1 this round. If you've summoned a landmark this game, give it +3/+1. Between things like Ancient Preparations and Preservarium, it's not hard to activate this. Even if you don't activate it, it's still Radiant Strike, which is not a great card, but not an unplayable card. But a lot of the time, this is going to be +3/+1 for 1 mana, which is a pretty solid combat trick. Usually lets you trade up really well, but the health buff will sometimes help you have your things survive. And plus, as a Shurima deck, your opponent will pretty much always play against this if you played things like Preservarium or Ancient Preparations, because this thing is so efficient for its mana cost. So for that whole reason, I'm going to give it 3 stars. Only 3 stars, because it's not a great combat trick, in my opinion. While it gives a lot of attack, so it's really nice with Lee Sin, of course. In my opinion, I feel like when you're playing a combat trick, you want health. You want to use combat tricks to keep your units alive, not 2-for-1 yourself by throwing away a combat trick and a unit to kill a bigger unit. Sure, sometimes you're killing a very important big unit, but still. I still think it's really good, though. Again, the biggest issue, and another reason why it's not ranked any higher, is you have to play landmarks, which is not terrible, thanks to Preservarium, and most Shurima decks like Preservarium outside of aggro decks, but it's not inconsequential negative. Anyway, though, next up, Siphoning Strike. It's Nasus's chance spell. Some people say this card is very underrated. I don't think so. I think this card is bad, but I do think it has a home in more mono Shurima lists as a just a fight spell, a strike spell, if you will. And it does have a very nice upside if it actually resolves. The problem is actually resolving it. But yeah, I can see it as like a 1 or 2 of in certain decks. I don't think you would play it as 3, though. I've tried it. I don't like it myself personally, but I know some people are very high up on this card. So I'm only going to give it 2 stars. I think it has a home in certain decks, but I'm not the biggest fan of the card. Next up, another champion. We have Severe, or Sever, however you want to pronounce her name. I say Severe. I know some people like to say Sever. I still say Severe because it sounds better to me. She is a 4-mana 5/3 quick attack spell shield. That's it. There's not much text here. To level her up, you have to have dealt 35 damage. She doesn't have to see this being done. You just have to deal the damage. Leveled up Severe, though, is really powerful. Still a quick attack spell shieldy girl. She's now a 6/4. That says when she's attacking allies have her keywords. Her champ spell is also Ricochet, so pretty bad champ spell. But it does help her level up, I guess, so that's kind of cute. But yeah, mostly just being played as a pretty good, efficient body, good stats for the decent stats for the cost, but very, very good abilities. Spell shield and quick attack are insanely good. Very tough to block her. And then if she does level up, she will give her attacking allies spell shield and quick attack, which could be annoying. So kind of an annoying card, but nothing too fancy still. So only 4 stars for me. Just fine. Nothing crazy here. Next up. Ooh, this is definitely in my top 10 cards for Shurima, in my honest opinion. Spirit Fire. It is a 7-mana burst speed spell. Give enemies -2/-0, and round end deal 2 to me this round. I like it. It is... The way I look at it is like kind of like burst speed avalanche. It shrinks your opponent's stuff, and then it deals damage at the end of the round. It doesn't do as much damage as avalanche, but the trade-off is it's slightly cheaper, and it's burst speed. I'm a big fan. Really nice in any like control Shurima deck. Helps you just buy a lot of time. It's not actually gaining you health, but shrinking all that stuff does kind of pseudo gain you health, so very big fan of it. Kind of bad against other control decks, but whatever. Pretty decent against mid-range and great against aggro, so 4 stars for me. Next up, Stone Weaving. 1-mana burst spell. Look at 3 random landmarks you can afford. Pick 1 to create in hand. I'm not a big fan of this card. I think this card is bad. The only reason I think you would play this card is if your deck wants a cheap burst spell to activate things like Veiled Temple, or to have a second spell get played that turn to activate things like, I don't know, Eyes of the Dragon or Claw of the Dragon or whatever. But outside of those niche scenarios, I think this card is unplayable, so 1 star for me. Speaking of Stone Weaving, though, we're going to look at Talia. It's also her champ spell. Talia is a 5-mana 2/4 who says when you play her, summon an exact copy of an allied landmark. Veiled Temple, anyone? To level up Talia, you have to have summoned 5+ landmarks. Leveled up Talia is really good. She still summons the exact copy of the landmark when she summons. She's now a 3/5. But now, when you attack, she will deal 2 to her blocker. If it's dead or gone, deal 2 to the enemy nexus instead. And if you have summoned, or if you have a landmark, do this another 2 times for 6 damage in total. The issue I have with Talia is you are limited to 6 spots on your board. And landmarks take up those spots, obviously. So, Talia, a landmark, and then the copied landmark, it's already 3 spots. Sure, if your board is filled, you can basically obliterate a unit or a landmark to summon something else from your hand, but you almost never want to do that. So it's kind of a tough champion to play because your board's going to get really full. But if you can copy a good landmark like Veiled Temple, you can kind of just run away with the game. The other issue I have is level 1 Talia kind of is a little mediocre. Sure, her summon ability is great, but her stat line's a little low. But her level 2 form is really great, but it's kind of tough and slow to level her up. But if you can level her up, she's really good. It reminds me kind of Yasuo. So 4 stars, though. I think she's really good. Kind of tough to play, though. But as more and more landmarks get into the game, I think Talia gets better and better because she will have more choices to choose from, and so on and so forth. Next up. Oh, speaking of landmarks, Unraveled Earth. I think this card's bad. 3-mana burst spell. Summon 2 Roiling Sands, draw 1. We know what the Roiling Sands are already. There are the landmarks that say when I'm gonna summon, destroy meter granted vulnerable. I like cards that replace themselves. I don't think I want to play a card like this for 3 mana though, even though it replaces itself. It kind of clogs up the board, even though it will give vulnerable to enemies eventually. But yeah, not a big fan of this card. 1 star because there is some synergy with Landmark Matters decks, and it does replace itself, so it's not terrible, but I'm not a big fan. Next up, Unworthy. 2 mana slow spell. Give an enemy follower -4/-0 this round. If you have fewer mana gems than your opponent, kill it instead. This is pretty cool with rights, and it's kind of nice against opponents that are ramping. But it's a 2 mana slow speed vengeance that can only hit followers. Can't hit champions. Also, before you say, well, if you're on parity with gems, you can give it -4/-0. Yeah, but that's not great. Like, giving something -4/-0 at slow speed is not amazing unless you obviously can give it vulnerable or challenger, and that's going to need another card. At the moment, I'm not a fan of this card. I think this card is bad. If there are more ways in the future to destroy your mana gems, sure, but right now there's not that many. And if you're not playing cards that destroy your mana gems, you need your opponent to play ramp. And if it gets to a late game where you both have 10 mana, even if your opponent's playing ramp, this is just 2 mana -4/-0 at slow speed. Kind of bad. 1 star though, because of potential. I love saying that, apparently. Next up, Voice of the Risen, a decent Anthem effect. 4 mana 3/4. If you've leveled a champion, allies have +2/+0. I prefer my anthems to give me more health and stuff to dodge removal. Not bad in more aggressive deck. Decent stat line too. 4 mana 3/4 dodges some common removal, mystic shots, get excited, etc., etc. So that's nice. Yeah, pretty nice with sand soldiers, I guess. Again, the problem is you kind of have to, like, it's a utility card, if that makes sense. And like, you're also a deck that would want to play Voice of the Risen also is like maybe wanting to play Sandcrafter, the 4 mana 3/5 that summons an attacking sand soldier. So there's a lot of contention for the 4-drop slot and for these Anthem style effects to buff small units. So for that reason, I'm going to give it only 2 stars. Decent in one deck, and that's really it. Next up, Waking Sands. This card is garbage. I'm not even going to try and like justify this card. It's a bad card. 2 mana slow spell, summon a Sandstone Charger. The Sandstone Charger again is a 2 mana 5/2 with ephemeral. Bad card. No deck wants this card. Just garbage. Mostly just expedition filler. 0 stars from me. Next up, Weight of Judgment. I've seen some people say this card is underestimated and underrated. It's expensive though. 4 mana slow spell, deal 2 to a champion or 7 to a follower. Some people say it's underestimated because it can hit very problematic champions like Aphelios, because he's been nerfed to 3/2, Twisted Fate, and Zoe. And I guess Teemo as well. But and it kills most followers because 7 to most followers is gonna kill them, but it's a 4 mana slow spell. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but if you really just need removal in a more mono Shurima deck, I'll play it. But I feel like if you're not mono Shurima, your secondary region probably has better removal than this. So I would only really play it in mono Shurima if I need removal and I'm that strapped for removal. 1 star. I really feel like just play like Exhaust or something to give something vulnerable if you need to remove something special. Next up, the last card of Shurima. This is a long video, by the way. Xenotype Researchers. We're going to end with a good card, too. Xenotype Researchers, very strong build-around card. 3 mana, 3/3. When I'm summoned, grant 3 random allies in your deck, +3/+3. Only really good for, like, one type of deck, and that's the type of deck that doesn't play that many units, so you can control, to an extent, exactly what's getting buffed. You can also combine this with Predict. Play Xenotype Researchers, then play Predict to try to predict up a buffed unit to the top of your deck. So, you know, Xenotype Researchers buffing up, say, like Fioras, Zoes, Elusives in general, Lee Sin. There's a lot of stuff you can buff up. Still, though, kind of tough to build around it, though, and only really goes into a couple of decks, so 3 stars from me. And that is it. Wow, that's a lot of cards. I think I will keep this as one whole video, though. In the future, though, as we get more and more cards and more cards get into the game, so these expansions get bigger and bigger, I might have to cut these into 2 different parts, though. Anyway, though, that's going to be it for today's video. I'm going to go and take a nap now. I'm sleepy. Oh, my throat is starting to kill me now. I hope you all enjoyed it, though. I had a fun time talking about it, though. I hope I don't lose my voice tomorrow because I've been talking nonstop for more than 2 hours. But it was a good time. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all maybe learned something from listening to me ramble. Again, as I said earlier at the very beginning, these are just my opinions. Maybe it's fine to disagree with me. Maybe you think something I said is great is really bad, or something I said is bad is really great. I would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. If you just enjoy the video in general, of course, it would be really nice if you could leave a comment or a like down below as well. And if you guys want to keep up with the Runeterra content, you can always go and subscribe to the channel as well. And if you want to watch me play some Legends of Runeterra, you can always go and check me out over on my Twitch account at twitch.tv/Zenaton. I stream there pretty much every single day. Anyway, though, thank you all again once more for watching the video. And until I see you guys in the next one, bye!